All right. Good evening, everyone. Happy Saturday. Live from Austin, Texas. Good. A bunch of people in the chat already. Good to see everybody. So, tonight we're going to be talking a couple things. We're going to be talking the Nahani Valley. If you've heard of the Nahani Valley, let me know in the chat. It's called the Headless Valley, right? For a good reason, which we'll get into. And then we're going to be talking about the Cheyenne warrior societies because we have a Cheyenne compilation coming out tomorrow. So that'll kind of give you some context for that. And then we'll hang out and do Q&A and whatever else you guys want. Let me check the chat real quick before we jump into it. And we'll hang out for a second, let everybody come in here. Let me know if you've heard of the Nahani Valley. The Headless Valley from Short Stories by Kate is a new one for me. Yeah, you'll like this one, Short Stories by Kate. I think it's an interesting one. It's a little bit of frontier history, some mystery, some fact, some fiction, and it happens in the early 20th century, in either 1904 or 1906. But a big point here is that a lot of people think the Old West and the frontier days both were confined to United States territory, and that's not true. Like, it's very much Canada was a part of that, and confined to everything before 1899. And as soon as we hit 1900, we had cars and electricity everywhere. And like, I was thinking about that, trying to find a way to describe that. And it's like us saying, well, as soon as the year 2000 hit, there was no more MTV. And it's like, well, no, MTV just closed, right, in 2025. And it's significantly waned over the past 2.5 decades. But it's been around. It was the same thing for the Old West, where it's like it wasn't just like 1900 and we had cars everywhere and electricity. Some places were in the 30s before they got, some in the 40s before they got all the trappings of modernity. So we'll jump into that. And the Cheyenne warrior societies, there's just so many. The Cheyenne were such a complex society. So we'll jump into that. I think that'll give you a better idea of how the battles we'll talk about tomorrow unfolded, like who was fighting where and all that good stuff. So yeah. All right, let's see. I'm gonna check the chat real quick, see if anybody's heard of this, and then we'll jump into it. Blakely J says, is this in British Columbia? It is northeast of British Columbia. This is going to be in the Northwest Territories. Still, it's northeast of British Columbia, right next to the Yukon. And I was trying to figure out how to describe it on a map. If you go up to Anchorage, Alaska, and then due east for a couple hundred miles, that's about the latitude of the Nahani Valley. And it's really, we'll jump into it here. It's, to me, and people, if you're a Canadian, jump in and correct me if you feel like I'm misleading or wrong on this. To me, it seems a lot like Canada's Yosemite, maybe like their Superstition Mountains, but it's a big valley. So to me, I was thinking Yosemite, where there's very convoluted sources on native inhabitants there. Like, there's not as many tribes in the valley as you would think. There weren't really any for a long time and by the early 20th century, there was hardly anybody there. The people that inhabited it or inhabit it now are called the Dine, which we kind of covered, right? Like, everybody calls themselves some version of the Dine, like, usually, because it means the people. And that kind of implies like, we're the people, you're not the people. And so they're the Dine up there. And there's another people down in the valley. And there's not a lot of evidence, but this is what they say happened. So there's another people down in the valley called the Nahani. And then that kind of came from them being called the Naha, and then they were called the Naha Dine. And it kind of morphs over the decades and centuries into Nahani. But the Naha are down in the valley. The Dine are up outside the valley. And the Naha are just down in the valley causing all kinds of trouble all the time. They raid. It's kind of like if you've ever seen 13th Warrior, where there's this tribe in the hills that the tribe kind of hidden, and they come out and attack. That's kind of how they describe the Naha. They're super bellicose and, would attack and then decapitate the body. I don't know what I could say. I'm going to say Sleepy Hollowed the bodies and burned all the houses down. And they were very averse to death. So they would burn inhabitants' houses down so they didn't haunt them, and decapitate them kind of for the same reason, so that they weren't haunted. And but they, like in Yosemite, inexplicably disappeared, if they were even there in the first place. But nobody is there in the early 20th century in the valley itself. And in the early 20th century, late 19th century, so like, I don't know, it gets annoying. Late 1800s, early 1900s, there's a gold rush up there. There's a Yukon gold rush in the 1890s. That's the one in Alaska. There was one in Colorado, I believe, in the 1860s, 1870s. Someone can correct me on that, but somewhere around there. Obviously, the one in California. Everyone thinks there was just the California gold rush. There was tons of gold rushes all over the West. And when there was a rush, and people were going to go out there. They're going to flood the area. So it behooved the native tribes a lot of times, or people would assume that it would, to not want miners to come into their area and say, we found gold. Because as soon as they do that, it's going to flood the area with miners. A lot like people might say that about Texas. As soon as it gets out, like, this is a good place to live, it's flooded with people from other states. But I digress. They didn't want people to come into the area and mine it. So when people did start coming, it was kind of shunned by the tribes. But there wasn't an all-out war, right? But the miners kept pushing further and further north up this canyon into the Nahani Valley. At the time, they don't know any different. They're just out there looking for gold, right? So the biggest seminal story that comes from this, in the preceding decades, there's always this lore from the Diné people that people are going missing, that it could be anything from animals to the Naha to local cryptids that they call, I looked at it in my notes, like the washi, I believe, which is kind of like a bear wolf hybrid. So there's a number of theories floating around at first why people started going missing, but that doesn't really deter our miners like miners. Okay, that's a big point here. They're out there looking for gold. There's a lot of names here. These are the only names I could really confirm. This is Willie and Frank McLeod, who supposedly went with their brother Charlie. Now, there's a lot of different versions of this. Sometimes Charlie is a cousin. Sometimes Willie and Frank went in 1906, but this occurs sometime in the time span from 1904 to 1906. They're pushing up the Nahani Valley. They're not wealthy men, so you got to kind of go out where there is no one to find and stake your own claim. They supposedly find a big cache of gold up the river. This is where they make a critical mistake that, if you're watching right now, the Wahila, thank you, Albat Witchwiggler, hell of a name. And that's the name of the cryptid, Wahila, the bear wolf hybrid. So anyways, they're pressing up the valley. And this is the crucial point, I think, the lesson of the night. If you are out there and you find any gold, don't either take all you can right now, take it and then leave. Don't come back and tell people, and don't say, I'm going to go back home and get my stuff and make one big run, and then that'll be my fortune. Don't do that. It never works out for these guys. Didn't work out for Frank and Willie. So what they did was mark their spot. All three of them come back. They say, listen, this is great. We found our big fortune. We're going to load our stuff up so we have enough to carry a lot of gold, and we're going to go up there and make our fortune and come back, right? There's nobody else up there. That's free pickings for them. This is going to change their life. So they go out into the wilderness. They go back up the Nahani Valley, and they're not heard from for a long time, for months, right? There's some accounts that say Willie or Frank missed their wedding, and so their fiance sent at this point, I think it's the Mounties. There's a lot of conflicting accounts, whether it's a search party or the Mounties, but there is a search party sent out after them. Some accounts say that it's led by a local mountain man. Some accounts say it's led by Charlie, either their brother or their cousin. Either way, they go up the valley for quite a while, and they start finding traps that are set that you would set to catch small animals, and they all have animals in them. So the people that are setting them to catch animals for food aren't coming and retrieving them, and that's kind of weird. And then they find the canoe that the brothers had taken upstream, and it's sunk by rocks, to keep it in the water, so it's hard to find. And that's not totally unheard of, right? But still a little weird. And then they keep going up the valley, and eventually they find this campsite, and there's two skeletons. Everything else is intact, right? The food is gone. The food's been ransacked, but the shelter that they had built, all the other inedible supplies, their bedding, their mining gear, stuff like that, is all intact. There's a little fire that, it's ashes now, but that's intact. And the two skeletons are headless. They're completely devoid of any meat, right? There's nothing on them. So they've been there for a while, and their one rifle is bent in like a U shape, and there's nothing else there. They clearly were caught off guard. This wasn't like a prolonged fight because everything else is in order, but there's no explanation. Oh, and then also I misspoke. The actual building, everything outside the building is good, right? But the actual building, the little shack that they had built, was burnt, not burnt down, but like, charred. So another mysterious thing that kind of sounds a lot like the post-combat death rituals of the Naha, right? But there's nothing else, and they don't find any people, they don't find any footprints, they don't find any signs of a struggle or any trail or like no broken branches, nothing like that. So there's nothing else to do. They load the skeletons up, they bring them back, and that's kind of the end of Frank and Willie. A couple years later, I believe it's 1907. Let me check here. No, 1917. Martin Jorgensen. I don't know. When I read that, it was like, that's not a good name to have. You're for sure going to you're not going to make it to the end of the movie. I don't know why. It just seemed like that name in particular is not going to make it to the end of the movie. So he goes, I'm going to check the chat in a minute. I'm just going to roll through this stuff real quick so I don't lose track. There were so many different names and accounts that I want to kind of keep it streamlined to some degree so you guys don't get as confused as I did. But Martin Jorgensen does the same thing. He goes up the Nahani Valley. There's a little tributary called the Flat River. He sets up kind of the same way. There was different accounts of whether he had actually gotten word of Frank and Willie McLeod's, gold spot, or if he had just thought, well, I got to go up here. Like there's bound to be gold up here, so I'm going to go out and see what's there. Either way, he ends up not far from the McLeod's campsite, and he too goes missing. They send out a search party for him. The search party at this point is probably going like, we're going to find this guy headless and near a burned out cabin. And if they did think that, they were right, because they found him in a burned out cabin. They had also found out, or he had supposedly written home. That's another, just hammering our lesson home, guys. Don't write home. Don't tell anybody. Don't say I'm coming back. If he had just packed up his gold and gone home, could have been a totally different story. But no, this guy's out there writing letters back home saying, "Oh, it's all good now." Or it's like a lottery ticket, right? Don't tell anybody that you won. He didn't know that or didn't abide by it. So they find him. Same situation. His gun is bent. Everything is intact except for the building, and he's completely skeletal himself. And I think in both these cases, they supposedly, I don't know, some of this sounds like the washing machine game, right? Like some of it just gets the facts kind of roll into one story and the other. But they found him reaching for a revolver too. So that's a common, something shocked these guys is kind of the common strain here. Like something shocked them, caught them off guard. They didn't get a chance to fight back. And now, they're missing a noggin. So that's number two. I think those are the two most pronounced headless stories, but it keeps going on till then. It goes all the way up till 1947. And in the interim, there's one really creepy story about a woman. I've heard her have different names too, but something along the lines of Anne LaFleur I've seen that a couple of times. So we're going to go with that. But she says like in the 1930s or 20s, like convinces the boys, like, I need to go out hunting with you. And by all accounts, like she was a good hunter. So they're like, you know what? Finally, like, okay, cool. Come on out. She goes missing. Nobody knows what's happened to her. She's missing for weeks. And there's a local trapper from the local, I think the Nahani tribe, the Dine tribe, right? Hard to keep all these names in line. But the Dine tribe, they're out there trapping. That's how they make their living. This guy is out one day and sees on this cliff this nude woman running up the cliff, and in this kind of bear crawl, but kind of spastic bear crawl, like herky jerky running up the cliff, like she's running away from something and not fully conscious somehow, right? And they say, well, what happened? Did you like try to help her? And he's like, no. And they said, well, why not? And he says, like, well, I figured it was the devil chasing her, so I just decided to mind my business. And it's like, I mean, not the most noble thing, but Easy to Monday morning quarterback that, right? Can't blame them entirely. So she goes missing, never seen again. Then in 1947, there is a man named Yukon Fisher. No, 1928, sorry. 1928, Yukon Fisher goes missing, never seen again. Then Ernest Savard is found in his sleeping bag in 1947. So after World War II, he wasn't found burned and he wasn't found as a skeleton, but he was found, sleepy hollowed. So a very common refrain here. And then there's all sorts of people up to the missing or to the present day that go missing all the time, which is, it's a national park. It's way up in the middle of nowhere, up in the Northwest Territories. If you're a Canadian, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's like nothing up there. There's nothing up there. It's more barren than our North and South Dakota. So it wouldn't be crazy for people to go missing. The headless part really adds to the lore of this, right? So yeah, that's kind of, let me check and see if I'm missing anything here. That's enough to, I can check the chat real quick. Let me check in, see what everybody's saying. Okay. I'm going to start at the top here and we'll work our way down and then we'll jump back into the Nahani Valley. Bama Deanna says there was a gold rush in Alabama before the Civil War. Yeah, there are several. I think California just had the biggest, but yeah, they're all over the place. And when they rushed. People just flocked there because it's a chance to change your life. Let's see. The Wahila is the cryptid. Oh, so like so people are wondering if it was the Dine people, if it was the Naha people, if it was just a bear. Like most of the animals in the area are bears and timber wolves. There's not like a lot else down there. So it could have been them. And it could have been the Wahila. There's the four big theories. Let's see. Ronald Wagner says, all this is new to me. Good. There's tons of YouTube videos on this. There's Mr. Ballin has a great video. What is it? Scary Interesting has another great video. And if you just Google or YouTube Nahani Valley, you'll get all kinds of 15, 20-minute videos. You'll see too, when you're watching them, they all have a little bit different account. They all take a little bit different angle on it. So you got to watch 4 or 5 of them to really get a real feel for the whole story. Let's see. How cool would it be? Albert Witchwiggler says, how cool would it be if there was a pre-human Neanderthal creature living up there still? Actually, that I guess is the 5th theory. There is a theory that, because they've found a mammoth and saber-toothed tiger remains up there. They do believe there would be some kind of prehistoric culture up there. And it's not impossible that there's one that has survived and maybe, avoided contact. We talked about that before. There's tribes that are uncontacted in the Amazon and on North Sentinel Island and all kinds of places. The likelihood of that as we, go into the 21st century, I don't know, but absolutely a valid theory that's thrown out there. Let's see. Mr. Flyer says, were they struck by lightning? Honestly, that's a pretty valid question. They were just two young guys, like two 25-year-old kids in Colorado 2 weeks ago or so on an elk hunt. And they didn't come back. And people are going, what happened? They sent a search party out and they'd both been struck by lightning. I guess it's more common than you would think. Tragedy. Let's see. I read somewhere that it was other miners trying to keep people away. Yeah, that's another theory. And it's the same thing with the local tribes, like either miners that were trying to steal the spot or local tribes trying to keep people out of there. But they didn't see anybody come in with huge wagon loads of gold. So it would be like, well, if they did take the gold from the spot, then it would be kind of strange that they didn't show up with it anywhere. Okay. I think animals would have spread the bones about. Yeah, that was my thought too. It wouldn't just be the skeletal remains all together and then the head gone, right? That seems a little outside the modus operandi of most predators. Let's see. Hammerson Peters does videos on this too. Yeah, he's, especially with the stuff in Canada, he's probably the best guy out there. Let's see. Short Stories by Kate says the headless part, much more than a coincidence. So few people there and that many headless corpses. Yeah, it's hard to deny that, right? That's it's doesn't mean that there's a ton of them, but like, yeah, there's only 2 or 3, but per capita, that's a lot in that area. Let's see. Real Fleece Johnson says, I'm eating a raspberry Dunker donut. Wish I could go back in time and give one to the native. Well, get yourself 2 and call it even. Armenian Bishop, good to see you. All right, that's the end of the chat. We'll jump back in here. So really, it's a matter of both local legend, some kind of horrific crime, and then media amplification, right? Time, let's see, with the Time magazine. Yeah, Time magazine wrote about this in 1947 after the death of the final guy who was found in his sleeping bag. There's also another story thrown around there that a guy named John O'Brien was found frozen upright with a box of matches. He wasn't headless, but he was, obviously not having a good time. And I think he was supposedly found next to it. Yeah, all of these are found, except for the sleeping bag guy, are all found next to a burnt out shelter. So another odd thread there. 1954, R.M. Patterson's book, The Dangerous River, mentions it. Let's see. And also Albert Fail mentions it in the National Film Board in a short film called Nahani in 1962. If you never heard about it before, that'd be a hell of a movie to watch. And there's a lot of other strange geographic kind of phenomenon in the area too. Lots of heart springs. There's a place called Rabbit Kettle, which is like this hot spring expanse that gets really foggy. It's like you can't see anything. So it adds to the creepy nature of, this is a big valley, right? So it's not the whole valley, but there's a portion of this valley that gets really foggy and even creepier. And if you've ever been to places that are really foggy, like the Central Valley in California has the Thule fog, you can't see anything. There can be something a couple yards away from you. You can't see it. So it's another, did someone attack them from the fog? Another valid question. Let's see. Anything else I'm leaving out here? No. So in the chat, let me know what you think happened, and I'll let you know what I think happened. I'll go first. So I really think it was, it's a curious set of circumstances, but not like wholly impossible. And I think it was a lot of local lore kind of getting amplified. I think something like that happened, but it's probably just guys going missing. And then these stories, I think, get amplified by the locals. So it keeps people from going back in there and doing it again. Because it's not only creepy to the locals, it's super inconvenient, right? And we got to go fish out their skeletons and explain this to the missus again. So that's my theory. Let me know what you think. Then we'll jump into the Cheyenne warrior societies here. And would you go into the Nahani Valley? You know what? That'd be a fun poll. Let me post a poll real quick. Post a poll. Would you go into the Nahani Valley? I know we got some adventurous people here. What'd you guys say last time? That you would rather, I forget what we said last time. You guys kind of creeped me out last time, though. I remember that. All right, let me know in the chat, in the poll there. Would you go to the Nahani Valley? Albat says, I think it's a solid take. Some tales amped by the locals, not eager to see anyone move into their turf. Sure. Yeah. And if anybody disagrees, let me know, though, because, like, logic is not fun. It's not entertaining. Let's see. Pennsylvania Plowboy says, has to be one crazy person with an axe to pick. Oh, duh. Thanks for jogging my mind. There was one account where they had actually gone and talked to the DNA people. I think sometimes they say it was the McLeod's cousin. Sometimes they say it was a brother. Sometimes they say it was like a local official, but they go out to talk to the DNA people and they're like, bros, are you guys doing this? What's happening? And they say, no, it's not us. It's this crazy guy. He's part of our tribe, but he lives like way out there. He's nuts. And he just like, Jeffrey Dahmer's people. In fact, it would be very much like if one of the DNA came and visited us and the first person they met was Jeffrey Dahmer. And then we have to go like, listen, dog, that's not all of us. That's a really bad example. I'm sorry that happened. Our bad, But that was another account, which I kind of thought was at least partly comical. Let's see. If they're gold in them hills. Yeah, I mean, people will do anything for gold. This is one of the least crazy things people have done for gold, really. The conquistadors, all kinds of crusades. Not the literal crusades, but, wars. Let's see. I appreciate your videos. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming by. Real Fleece Johnson. We have a good time doing these. You asked if we would rather meet Bigfoot or feral people. That's right. And you guys said, I think you said feral people. Freaked me out, man. Let's see. I'd like to know if the skulls were completely missing from the site or if they were found nearby. They were not found. No. Yeah, that's kind of adds to the creepy factor, right? How common do you think cannibalism happened? It depends on the area, but it wasn't unheard of. And some tribes, like the Tonkawa, would do it ritually. That was a big kind of point of contention. The Comanche did not like that. That really, a lot of tribes had a big bone to pick. They did not like the Tonkawa for that. And I think the Karankawa might have too. And I think that was a big divisive point. They really did not like those tribes. And so a lot of those tribes became scouts because they really did not like the Comanche and the Kiowa. So they thought, like, we'll work against you guys because we're tired of you guys. They would raid them just because they didn't like them. All right, let's see here. Was there a lot of gold found there? Yeah, it was fair enough to cause a gold rush, but it just becomes this, like, it's a real estate game, right? So you're going to as close as you can to the initial strike, but if there's anybody there before you, you're going to have to keep working your way out and going into more and more remote territory to find anything. And you can see that in the California gold rush. Those guys were going out in the middle of nowhere. Let's see the story that goes with some serious gold mine, if I recall correctly. Yeah, there's a real common thread here with gold mines. Like, there's several mines up there. I think they're all closed now. But this is similar to the Superstition Mountains in Arizona. Another thing to YouTube, I know, like, I'm kind of the caveat. I'm the conduit for everybody. Where I'll tell you what to go look up on YouTube. Go look up the Superstition Mountains too. Really creepy place, full of kind of the same folklore. Where there's a hidden tribe and lots of people go and found Headless and lots of mines and lots of ghosts and spirits and cryptids. But it is odd that there's such a similar theme. It's like Bigfoot. There's this real similar theme, and it's from tribes in northern Mexico and Arizona, and then also in the far, far, far northwest of Canada. It's like, well, they're thousands of miles apart. Why are their stories so similar? Let's see. My PF Flyer says, my theory is they were killed by lightning, as evidenced by a bent arm and a scorched cabin, not totally consumed by. That's a good point. The local tribe separated the heads and carried them off based upon superstition of a wandering spirit. Yeah, that was their death ceremony, right? So that checks out. My only question for you would be, how do you explain the bent rifle? Because it's supposedly bent in a U, which is a common part of a lot of Bigfoot stories too. He will take the rifle and bend it. So if that part was true, it's curious to me. I live in Aztlan, and they say there was mass cannibalism there. Very interesting to imagine the land in the past. Real Fleece Johnson says. Hopefully it's not still there. I'm not going to a barbecue in Aztlan just to be safe. Just kidding. Let's see. Scanning through the chat here. You guys got some solid takes. Let's see. I like that hit by lightning, Tate. That's a good one. I hadn't thought of that yet, and that really kind of makes me think. And even more so because of that recent story. There might have been 2 recent stories. You don't really think about how, possible that is. And it's like, yeah, one lightning strike and you're done. All right. Anybody else? What do you think? Would you go into the Nahani Valley? We got 100% saying yes. How many of you voted? If you hadn't gotten in the poll yet, jump in the poll. We have 100% saying yes. We're going to have to organize some trips to some crazy places. PF Flyer says iron still will bend in a lightning strike. Sure, that's true. Like, it would, melt it, right? That's a good point. You never know, man. Wouldn't want to take a canoe down the Rock River at sunset. I'm not taking a canoe down any river at sunset. All right. And do you have any local lore yourself? Let me know where you're from and if you have a story like this. Because no matter where you're from, they're always creepy. And nothing better than creepy history. Oh, so what if there's so much gold that during the big storms, it produces crazy electrical storms due to gold's conductivity? Yeah, could be. Wouldn't be the craziest thing that happens in Northwest Canada. But why the sunken canoe? So that's a good story. Good question. Short stories by Kate. That's a pretty common practice when people would want to store their canoe. They would just put rocks in it so it doesn't float away, and they just mark a spot where they're going to come back to it. But it is curious that they would do it when they did it. And the people that found him kept finding more and more disconcerting things as they got closer and closer to camp. So to me, it's like a horror movie, right? To me, dark forest, progressively scarier things, headless at the end, headless people. Tarantino should take this on. I live close to Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, and apparently a lot of hikers go missing. Yep, on the Appalachian Trail. And again, like, does that mean that there's something supernatural or surreptitious going on? No, it doesn't. People go missing all the time. I think we underestimate, how easy it is to go missing. You could see that on the Oregon Trail, and pioneers were crossing the continent. It's all right. This is terrible to say, but especially in that Donner Party book, The Indifferent Stars Above, there's lots of accounts where people are just like, I don't know, like my kid just like went into the bushes and then he was gone. It's like not unheard of. People can just disappear out there. They're heart wrenching. There's so many like that. It's like you guys put a leash on them or something. Let's see. Man mound in Baraboo, Wisconsin. Crazy looking split head effigy mound. Wisconsin's got some crazy stuff out there. You guys got some wild energy in Wisconsin. Let's see. Anybody else? Chip in your local legend before we move on here. I love hearing them. We got 82% of you saying you would go visit the Nahani Valley. Would you go alone, though? Like it's just a hard no for me, Even if there is gold, I feel like I'll take my chances with crypto or something. I'm not going up a river. Short Stories by Kate says Yosemite has hikers lost each year, most of the time found just because the simpler ones got lost. You're saying like the simple ones? Fair enough. Yeah, I'm from not far from Yosemite, and just all the time people go missing because we kind of underestimate how vast these areas are too. So it's a lot easier to disappear than you would think, but it's pretty tough to have your little noggin popped off, The chance of being decapitated does tend to lend to the fun, cool factor. It really does. It really does. It takes up a solid 2 or 3 points just with that being in the mix. All right. Last chance here, and then we're going to move on to the, if you have any creepy local stories, let me know. And we're going to move on to the Cheyenne warrior societies. And then we'll do Q&A and hang out. Let's see my notes here. All right, check the chat one more time. Ball lightning, known as St. Elmo's fire, has destroyed old farmsteads, stone and woods buildings. I got a picture on my screen from the family farm where a building was destroyed many years ago. Yeah, ball lightning is a real phenomenon, and it's pretty frightening. There's lots of instances where it's taken out big areas. That's another one of those things where it's like, if I was a local tribe back in the day, you got to have you know what I mean? You got to have a story. Just say like, that's from Making the Buffalo mad or something, right? You got to have some explanation for that, because what the hell? Let's see. Pennsylvania Plowboy says maybe they had pretty teeth. Bro, that's dark. That's the darkest thing we've had on the chat so far, but funny. Let's see. Have you heard of the brown lights phenomenon of North Carolina? I have not. What's that? Rain Travel says the brown light phenomenon of North Carolina. Let's see. Doing activities alone is never wise. True. It's a lot cooler, but no, not wise. Eric Fleming died in the Amazon whitewaters when his canoe capsized. Again, like Amazon whitewaters, what are you doing there? A lot of choices had to be made to get here, and they were all wrong. Don't go there. Real pretty Chiefs. Oh, you guys are going for it tonight. Let's see. Can you explain the brown lights phenomenon? Brown lights phenomenon. And then we'll move on. And does anybody know anything already about the Cheyenne warrior societies? It's complex stuff. I think you guys will like it. The brown lights are a mysterious phenomenon of glowing lights reported to appear over Brown Mountain in North Carolina for centuries. Maybe we'll have to look into that next. Evan Sight says, favorite channel. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being here. These are really fun. You guys always have some wild stuff to chip in too. I walk away slightly traumatized every time, which is what I'm going for. Let's see. All right. So Pet Detective says somewhat like Mark's lights. So you guys know all kinds of stuff. You guys are spending too much time online, except for this. Spend time here. But okay. So moving out of the creepy portion of our program, which takes up a sizable part of our program, we're going on to the Cheyenne Warrior Society. So, like I said, I think this will give you a real feel for how Cheyenne battles unfolded, how Cheyenne society worked, and how the things we're going to talk about in the episode tomorrow went down, because it's like you'll have an idea of what society was doing what before, during, and after the battle. And the Cheyenne are really unique in their stratified, organized society, because it wasn't unheard of to have other warrior societies, but they had tons of them, and they all had their own unique role in Cheyenne society, and they even rotated them like in a power cycle so that one group didn't get too much power. So we'll go over each group and how they fit into Cheyenne society. There are, let me see how many I wrote down. There are, I believe, 6 total warrior societies with little derivatives off of each of those. So there can be subgroups within these groups, but these are the 6 big ones. The first one is the elk horn scrapers, and you'll see that described as elk or elk horn or elk scrapers, but they are traditionally kind of it seems like the older guys. They enforce discipline. They take responsibility for sacred tribal duties, like actually organizing the ceremonies. They would wear elk horn, which is pretty awesome, as a headdress, and on their shields. The elk to them, every society has a meaning behind the animal that they picked, and it kind of informs the way that they do business. It informs the way they fight, but also the way that they just carry out their business within society. Neanderthal for $10, man. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. Wow, thank you. The mountain lights are clearly UFO smuggling Nessie to the valley so she can collect enough severed heads to pay off the Grafton monster. That's the most coherent theory we've heard all night, actually. I like that. Yeah, I mean, Nessie has to make like a transatlantic flight, right? But if we're going full paranormal, that's the best thing I've heard all night. Thank you very much. All right, so the Elk Society, let's see. All right, I hear this about a lot of societies, but supposedly this one charged first and never retreated. It was supposed to mirror the elk's behavior, right? Like when an elk is mad, they just go after you. Okay, so the next one, we've talked about this one, the Bowstring Society, or the Bowstring Men. They are the tribal police, basically. They enforce ethics within the tribe. They enforce cultural norms, and they also keep order during the buffalo hunts, during any migrations. Like they direct to keep people in line, and in ceremonies. So the Elkhorn Society is organizing the ceremony, and the Bowstring keep discipline during the ceremony. Let's see. The members, I got this all written out. The members, their bows were painted red, and they carried little whistles made out of eagle bones. And they blow those when they went into battle, but it was also like a police whistle, like, knock that off. Let's see. Their role was basically as a police and security force. Roman Nose. We've talked about Roman Nose at the Battle of Beecher Island. He was the most famous bowstring man. They were called bowstring men. He was like not the biggest guy in the tribe, but not the most prominent member. He didn't have the most power, but the most famous one of them. And on to our next one. Very likely the most well-known, the Dog Soldiers. If you've seen any picture of a Cheyenne warrior, he's most likely portrayed as a dog soldier. They're the most well-known band for sure. They're the ones that are known to they wear these big long sashes and this kind of horizontally layered feather headdress, black feathers, and they kind of go out from their heads. And the sash is meant to put a spear through. They stick it into the ground saying like, I'm not going anywhere, dog. We're going to be here till this fight's over. So they dismount and they're saying, we're going to fight till this is over. No retreat. That's what they became famous for. They really made their bones as the preeminent, most fierce fighting force in the Cheyenne. And after 1864 with the Sand Creek Massacre, they really started to distinguish themselves, like rise in power. And eventually in mid 1860s, they kind of split off. Like they didn't totally split off, but it's like they had their own side project going, right? Let's see. Moving on down the list. Make sure I didn't leave anything out here. The Crooked Lances. From moving on here. The Crooked Lances, they served as the holders of the sacred arrows, which is, if you've seen our episodes on the sacred arrows, we've got a couple. The sacred arrow, what is it? The recapture, I think, of the sacred arrows, the Pawnee versus Cheyenne at, I'll post them in here, but we do both episodes where they lose the sacred medicine arrows and then they take them back, and then the sacred medicine arrows don't end up working out that great for them. But it's a big deal. They don't think that they can do anything without the sacred medicine arrows. You don't have those, you can't fight. They lose them once and they get one back, and they take it and they say, like, you got to like take this one and make some new medicine arrows. So they make them a whole new bundle, and they take a couple of them to the Black Hills. Like they ride hundreds of miles, and they take them and they put them in this little spot in the Black Hills, and they think like, okay, this should be good. Now we can go and attack the Pawnee. And they attack the Pawnee, and the new medicine arrows don't work. So they're just like, we got to start from square one, what the hell? And which we've all been there. Tough day on the job, right? Let's see if I'm missing anything on the Crooked Lances. They carried literal crooked lances. It looks like a shepherd's crook, and they would adorn them. They'd wrap them in beaver tail and then adorn them with eagle's feathers. So it's a hell of a look. It's like very Mad Max, in my opinion. And our last one, the Fox Soldiers. Again, the name implies or informs how they fight. They are the scouts. They're known for being swift and aggressive. They'll go out and make quick strikes. They'll figure out the area. They'll do recon. They are known as kind of a quick acting tactical force, right? And you'll see they would be used before battles. If we talk about a Cheyenne battle, the Fox Soldiers were most likely sent out ahead of that to scout the area, scout the enemy, and kind of form a plan of battle. Every one of these societies has their own unique dances. The Fox Society was supposed to be like one of the wildest ones, where they like hopped around like a fox. It was supposed to be like pretty cool to see. And they had foxtails on their shields, on their war shirts, on their headdresses, just lots of foxtails. Like, let them know we're the Fox Soldiers. It's a pretty specialized band. It'd be a pretty underrated one. They're pretty cool. They got a lot of cool little missions they pulled off. And our last one here is the Red Shields. They're one of the older societies. This didn't all happen overnight. This comes from centuries, where they start one society, and it's not because they're mad at each other. They just kind of think like, oh, I have an idea for my own society, or I really like elk. I really like dogs. I really like foxes. I like the way that they operate. The way that animal operates is more akin to the way I operate. So I'll start my own society. The Red Shields, though, were one of the OGs. They were in charge of purity ceremonies. They actually did the ceremonies. They were in charge of ritual preparations, which is a huge thing. It's before every battle. Every tribe has their full preparation routine that they go through, much like a pre-game routine. Like everybody's going to do a sweat lodge. We're all going to get painted. Sometimes they ride around the village. They'll have like kind of pep talks. They'll do ritualistic cutting of some kind, or some kind of bloodletting, all kinds of stuff. They'll fast and not eat anything, and then drink as much water as they can hold. It's depending on the tribe, but they all did some pretty metal stuff. Let's see. So that's the end of the Red Shields. Everything's obviously, for the Red Shields, they have shields that are painted red, and everything is usually, regardless of what society you're with, everything is blessed by a medicine man. So it is like, in my mind, it's from an animistic theological standpoint, but it is very akin to like medieval knights, where the Knights Templar, like everything was directed by a priest. Everything is kind of directed at the behest of your theological leader. And it was very much like that with the Cheyenne. The medicine man, at the end of the day, kind of ran the show. Like, if you don't have the sacred medicine arrows, and somebody hasn't blessed them, like, dog, you're not going to war. We got to get this straightened out first. All right, let me check the chat real quick. Short Stories by Kate sent in 10. Thank you so much. Great live stream tonight. Thank you so much. We see you in here all the time. We appreciate everybody that keeps showing up. This is a lot of fun for me. Hopefully it's a lot of fun for you guys too. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Let's see. Albat Witch Wiggler says you can actually see the Milky Way in the night sky with no light interference. Yeah, I grew up in the country. You could see the Milky Way. Let's see. Been watching your videos for a while. Slockmaster says, huge fan. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Slockmaster, does that mean you're like a spear hunter? Eastern Nevada has some of the darkest night skies, Space Cowboy says. What's up, Space Cowboy? Good to see you, man. Been waiting to see you. Yeah, Eastern Nevada is wild out there. My grandpa used to go out to a cowboy poetry gathering in Elko. It was out, way out there. I guess that's like central Nevada, but it was a long drive, and there was nothing else around. Let's see. Nice. Let's see. Nice way out in the desert. Every society needs some kind of policing. Short Stories by Kate. As Cheyenne still sure did. And in my mind, all right, I don't think this is controversial. This isn't like a terribly insensitive thing to say. I think it's a compliment ultimately, but the Cheyenne's stratification of their society and the, strict adherence to the rules of their social group, and every group having a purpose in the larger society, is very Japanese in my mind. It's if you wanted to think of something akin to it, where it's this, these are the cultural norms, this is how they are enforced. It's a warrior society. It is based off of large parts off of honor, and there is an underlying unification in their spiritual viewpoint, and just a very very ritualized approach to virtually everything that they do, which is not common. It's not as common for the Blackfoot. It is super uncommon as you go farther south, especially in the early to mid 1800s. The Kiowa have a pretty complex society, but that's kind of it once you get south of Colorado. Let's see. Stealthy sneaking foxes, the ninjas of the animal world. Yeah, and that's kind of, they're the ninjas of the Cheyenne too. The Fox Society. Let's see. Many currently disagree. I do. Oh, we're talking about the police force. Okay. Getting after it in the chat. I like it. Albat Witch Wiggler compares them to special forces. Yeah, I would say maybe akin to, if you're familiar with how the U.S. Air Force Special Operations works, there's they just added a SSR. It's a special reconnaissance team that probably in the last 10 years they've added. I think that's the most akin to the Fox Society. The Air Force has combat control, pararescue, and now they have the special reconnaissance, and they are sent out specifically to survey battlefields in very small groups and report back. And they're also, they're combat competent or combat effective. So I would think that's the most akin to them. And I've been thinking a lot about this, like who is the most, who in the Old West is most akin to current special forces? And I would say probably the Fox soldiers or any scout is akin to the special reconnaissance. I think the Rangers are probably the only equivalent to like modern day tier 1 units, like a Delta Force, just because they're a quick reaction, super small hostage rescue force that is designed to operate virtually autonomously and has a very strenuous, although albeit different, very strenuous and exacting qualification process. And I'm trying to think of others. The SEALs, I can't really think of anybody for, but there are more. We'll do an episode on that. Let's see. Red shields, not for camouflage, I assume. Not for camouflage. And the red is a really common color too for war. Red and black are really common colors. So they're not really trying to hide. They're trying to stand out and scare their enemy. Which you see a dude coming at you painted red with a red shield, I'd be freaked out. You are exactly right with that comparison. Alec, which you're going to have to be more specific, man. What am I exactly right about? We have to be really nailed that down. It could be anything, right? Just kidding. Nothing wrong with raising your families in an honorable society. Amen to that. Nothing wrong with that. Have you heard of the uncanny Neanderthal theory? I have not. Just had my mother's memorial today here in Oklahoma, saying Creek hymns today. My whole life spent in Oklahoma Methodist Indian Church. Lots of history here, and especially in Lawton. Well, God bless, man. All of our sympathies. That's a tough thing. So I'll be praying for her, and I know we all will. Thanks for coming by. There is lots of history in Lawton. That's where the Quanah Parker Star House is. Let's see, Japanese Warrior Society in Cheyenne. Yeah, Japanese Warrior Society in Cheyenne. And I had to think about that a little bit. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get torn to pieces for that. But that makes sense, right? I think there's a valid comparison there. Let's see. Oh, man, we are getting after it in the chat. Cool. Nevada is basically a desert, and I love it. It is basically a desert until you hit that very far western edge into the Sierras. And y'all go from the desert into the mountains. It's abrupt. Let's see. Oh, you guys, there's so many, it's hard for me to pick through them. What Cheyenne society? Let me see if I can post that. I think this is a good question. Start Q&A. I think I can do, yeah, start a poll. I already got a poll going. Start a Q&A. What Cheyenne society, Cheyenne Warrior Society would you most like to be part of? Would you most like to be part of? See how fast I type? It's amazing. Uh-oh, I lost the chat, guys. 1 second. Top chat. Live chat. There we go. Working live. You know what? Everybody harshes Bill O'Reilly, and I don't agree with Bill O'Reilly on everything, whatever. But when he flipped out and he's like, "Let's do it live." Have you ever done something live? There's a lot going on. I'm not saying he's the coolest guy ever. I'm just saying I can kind of get that. Let's see. I heard Star House just fell in. Also, that sucks. I was wanting to go visit there. Yeah, I had heard there was a lot of issues with the owner. And isn't there a bunch of like circus stuff and everything out on the property too? It's pretty run down from what I heard. Was scalping a North American thing, or was it common amongst South American tribes as well? I don't know about South American tribes, but what I've learned so far is that it was brought over from the Dutch or the Spanish. It was a European thing, and they had kind of taken a liking to it as a way to show that you had indeed taken who you said you had. Because you could take an ear or a nose or something, and it's like, I don't know if that's that guy's nose. But let's say like you're out to get like Slash, right? Everybody knows Slash. If you're just like, hey, I brought back this Slash's scalp, you would know that's Slash's scalp, right? Hopefully that doesn't get me in trouble. It's just a hypothetical. I'm a big Slash fan. I'm just saying. Yeah, a bunch of carnival stuff was out there, right? Okay, that's too bad. That I was really hoping they'd preserve that. That is a huge piece of Western history. And I'm starting to feel like I shouldn't say this in Texas, but Oklahoma is kind of underrated, right? The more I learn, I'm like, a lot going on up there. Alex says, I've read that scalping was already practiced here. Yeah, I have too. I guess I've read more accounts that it was brought over, but I think they were probably doing some facsimile of it, right? They're doing some version of it, or maybe taking other body parts or something like that. And then they kind of streamlined it or adapted it. Just it's not unheard of in cultures, right? That's kind of how it always works. Like I'm already doing this, but then I see how you do it, and it's like, oh, I'll kind of borrow from that. It's a macabre thing to think about, but it's probably how it worked. Isn't there evidence of Plains tribes engaging in scalping pre-European contact? Yeah, there is. It's just kind of like how they did it, and a lot of those accounts like have different, like I said, different body parts that they're taking. It may have been the size of the scalp or like how you were maybe preserving it, but there are accounts. It just seems to be more prevalent, and for different reasons too. It's like it becomes less to show that how am I trying to phrase this here? It's more to show numerically, I guess, how many you've taken as opposed to just another trophy, right? There's a real pragmatism behind it. Isn't there evidence? Let's see. William Watts Fall wrote 4 volumes of American history in Minnesota. He told that St. Paul Indian mounds were from the old olds and thought that'd be Cheyenne rather than the tribes that were there. That could be because most all those plains tribes that kind of come from the Great Lakes area. The Blackfoot did, not the Cheyenne did, the Lakota did, the Dakota did, who are a sub-tribe of the Lakota. So the Blackfoot did. The Kiowa and the Comanche came down from the Rockies from the west, but there's lots of tribes that had migrated. And I think really the Lakota and several other tribes had come from like the southeast and then gone up to the Great Lakes and then finally made their way out onto the plains. I believe there was a mass grave that was that were scalped in the plains from like 1300s. Yeah, I read a lot of these accounts too. That's a big point of contention. I just my stance on it is that they were doing some kind of trophy taking. They were absolutely doing post-mortem mutilation, and for different reasons on that too, but generally because they wanted you disabled in the afterlife. But it seems like it's more prevalent post-European incursion. But I'm open to being wrong on that. Let's see. Scan through this. Yeah, let me know in the chat too what you think. Because a lot of you guys know a lot of stuff. Do you think that scalping was brought over by the Europeans, was maybe more widespread post-European arrival, or was it something that came from the tribes themselves? Let's see. Have you ever heard of the Mill Creek battles up and down what is now Susanville? I have. I lived in Chico for a while, and I was doing some research, and I found the Mill Creek battle. We might do an episode on it soon, just because I've lived there, and I was like, oh, I know that area. There's a lot of really brutal stuff that happened in the Susanville, Chico. What else is up there? But in that North San Joaquin Valley, North Valley area. Let's see. PD says they took care because it carried its own powers. It carried the powers of the owner. Some did. It seems to vary by tribe too, their motivation for it. Like the reason the Cheyenne did it may not be the same reason the Seminole did it. Let's see here. The Dakota met their demise out of the northern Mississippi. The Dakota met their demise by the Ojibwe. I've been to the massacre site in Aitkin County. Can you elaborate what year was that? That might be a good one to do. We just did an episode on the Dakota. We're doing more on the Dakota Wars too. That was a really rough patch. That was a rough one too, which I kind of understood, but I didn't really understand until we got into the episode. None of your business says it was already practiced here before European contact. And I don't disagree with that. It's just to the extent and maybe the reasons behind it. Let's see. Were there any tribes that rivaled the Comanche in terms of brutality? Certainly. I mean, almost any of the Plains tribes were known for doing a lot of the same things. And I think a lot of the East Coast tribes had more practiced, more intentional, and more complex cultural torture rites that were really scary in how thought out they were in granular details. Like, well, we're going to tie you up here, and then we're going to shove these things under your fingernails, and then we're going to cut your fingers off, and then on and on and on. It's like, don't we have something else to do here? But it goes on and on. It's usually the women employing it or carrying it out. So it's not unheard of levels of brutality. It's just this, to me, like if there's an analogy to be had in boxing where like they're like Mike Tyson. Like there were lots of boxers before, but when this guy came out in black trunks, the Comanche didn't have hardly any ornamentation, especially in the early 1800s, the 1810s to the probably 1850s, but for a long time, they didn't even have headdresses. They got that from the Cheyenne, some of the northern tribes, maybe in the Kiowa. That Kiowa had fancier, more ornate adornments, but the Comanche would just wear like a buffalo headdress. They paint themselves black, and they would just take out everything. And they were only there to advance. It was very Mongol like. They came up from nothing. They came down from the Rockies and they were just kind of perpetual whipping boys. And then they got a hold of the horse and they made everybody pay. They were out to take everybody out. And it wasn't a matter of like, it wasn't a matter of like, maybe we can get along. It's like, you're going to listen to us or we won't get along. And that won't be a good time for you. And they expanded into a massive economic power. They were an empire run on like trading and war, but with no real infrastructure. Even the bands weren't cohesive. They got along, but what the Quahati were doing might be totally different from what the Panateka were doing, and they might have nothing to do with the Nahanni. So the negotiations you had with them might be completely different band by band. There's hardly any cohesion. There's not a lot in the way of cultural complexity. Like there's not a lot of rituals. There's not a lot of theology. There's no basket weaving or beads or ornate headdresses, especially in the early times. So it's just like this culture that is just a stripped down war machine. There are no warrior societies. There are very little rituals like the Cheyenne or the Blackfoot would have. They're just down in Texas, just getting down. It's very Mike Tyson. Like they don't care about anything else. They're just here to hit people, which I've always found rather interesting. Let's see. There are villages discovered built like forts that they had mass graves that included women and children. No telling how many tribes were wiped out, untold. And most of the tribes that you see on a map when it comes to post-European arrival, when they were in contact with them first, a lot of times they had just gotten there or relatively just gotten. They may have been there for a couple decades or maybe a century, but before that, there was another tribe there and they'd been driven out. And before that, there'd been another tribe there. I like to think of it, all of North and South America were basically a large scale gang war. And that's not to be dismissive or demeaning, but it is to say like, there is no overarching federal power. There is no state level power. There's no cohesive law enforcement. It's just like, who can you get along with and who do you not get along with? And your hold on your homeland is only as good as your ability to defend it. And the second that slips, you're going to lose your homeland. And that's the way it went for eons. It was not, it's not to say that they were unduly brutal. It's not to say that it was disanalogous to what was happening in Europe or Asia or the Middle East or Africa at the time. But it was a much more brutal place. And that's kind of like what our show is based on, but it was a much more brutal place than people realize. And I think to understand that is critical in your understanding of the history of our country in North America and South America, and to also properly respect the tribes, right? It's like they get portrayed as like, oh, they just got overran. It's like, no, these guys were badasses. These guys were getting down for centuries and forestalling the American government, forestalling American expansion for at least a century, for many, many decades, with very little in the way of support, very little in the way of weaponry and technology, at least comparatively. And they forestalled millions of people moving west for many decades. That's incredible. Let's see. Politics of Eastern tribes was intricate. Yeah, their whole society was intricate. And I think that speaks a lot to geography too. Their societies were much more sedentary, much more agriculturally based. So, you have, I don't want to say the luxury, but the ability to create more complex societies and trade alliances where it's like, especially in the early 1800s, late 1700s on the open plains, you're just scrapping to get after it. You're just trying to follow the buffalo. That's all you have. You don't have any agriculture. Maybe the Dakota did a little bit. The Mandan did a little bit. The Osage did a little bit, but they're more on the eastern edges of the plains. Once you're in the South Plains and the Middle Plains, it's like, it's the buffalo. It's all you got. And if you don't follow them and you don't make the hunt successful, you're just living hand to mouth the whole time. And there wasn't really a lot of time, a lot of energy left to devote to create these complex alliances and trade routes and cultures, even, at least not for a while. Let's see. I guess my final point there would be, once the cultures of the Cheyenne and the Comanche and the Kiowa, they, like anything else, they'd all intermix. And so by the late 1850s, maybe 1860s, you'd see the Comanche with Cheyenne headdresses, basically these long headdresses. Quanah Parker has one where that was like kind of unheard of in the decades prior. Let's see. So even amongst the tribes, there's a real mixing of cultures that took place throughout the late 1800s, especially. Let's see. Armenian Bishop says, I have Minnesota German ancestors from my dad who fought in the Dakota War. They helped defend New Ulm. New Ulm. That's tough for me to say. It's tough for me to say in narration. We're going to have a New Ulm video coming out. That happened right after Redwood Ferry, kind of like the day after. You probably know this, but it was right after the battle at Redwood Ferry. And he must have been a bad dude because the civilians put up a hellacious fight there. That was a bad time. Let's see. Well, there's a lot of chats in here, so let me work my way down. What is Short Stories by Kate says, what is New Ulm? It is a small town in Minnesota, not far from Redwood Ferry. If you haven't seen our Redwood Ferry episode, go check that out after this for sure. And the New Ulm battle happened right after, where the Dakota had finished their attack on Redwood Ferry and just moved right to the next town. And that they had gotten away from the forts and fighting the soldiers and just started taking over the towns. Because they were mad. They had gotten a lot of treaties broken with the government, and they were basically starving. So they're like, we're going to come take your guys' food. And they killed a lot of people. Let's see. The trading for Santa Fe. They were trading from Santa Fe to the Comanche were trading from Santa Fe in New Mexico. They had their own mini economy there with the Comancheros. Like it was the Quahati, I think, farthest east band or farthest western band. But it was like the Comancheros would do these super dangerous missions where they would take a bunch of trade goods out into the plains, and they'd meet at these specific spots. And they never really, it's like doing deals. I don't mean this in a bad way, but it is like meeting the cartel in the middle of Mexico, right? Where it's like, you don't really know what's going to happen. Like, hopefully this works out well. You got to sell them some PlayStations or something. And like, hopefully this works out well. You'll walk away with some money, but maybe it won't. That happened a lot. The Comanche dictated an entire economy. They traded from North Texas to South to Mexico. They were raiding all the way to Mexico City. And anytime you raid, a lot of times trade follows that. Then all the way to Eastern Texas, like Houston area, and on up to like Nacogdoches area, maybe a little bit west of that. But a huge expanse of just people, basically just like people on horses, just carrying their stuff around, which is meant as a compliment. They did all this without much structure. They did this on pure willpower. Let's see. Space Cowboy says, pet detective. He's talking to pet detectives. I was raised on BBC Sunday nights, PBS Channel 11. There's a lot of stuff. Oh, you're talking about Monty Python. Yeah. Let's see here. They certainly inhibited but couldn't stop Manifest Destiny. Yeah, unfortunately or fortunately, right? Depends on, I guess, who you're asking there. Let's see. In 2025, Manifest Destiny can be a prickly term. I'd say that. I think the hunters were far more brutal than sedentary ones. Comanche had low birth rate and were kidnapped from all tribes as well as Mexicans and Texans. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I would say the hunter tribes were more brutal than the sedentary ones because of the torture methods. It kind of gave them more time to think up crazy stuff to do. But they're more bellicose probably in the aggregate sense. Like as a whole, yes, their society was far more based on war. And I meant to talk about this at some point. They had an exceptionally low birth rate because the theory I've seen most commonly posited is because of being a horsebound tribe, it would just cause super high miscarriage rates. So they adopted out of necessity. Their bloodline, genetically, they've studied it, and it's one of the most one of the most diverse bloodlines in all of Native American tribes, because they would take almost whoever they could get. Like if you were a young Mexican child, if you were a young Texan, if you were from another tribe, especially if you're a young boy, they're more likely than not, if you're not a fighting age male, they're more likely than not going to adopt you and turn you into a warrior of their own out of necessity, because they just couldn't keep their numbers up, even at their height. We're talking I don't know, 20,000 people, something like. It's not a lot. It's not a lot. It's smaller than your average small town, and they're ruling all of New Mexico, Oklahoma, virtually all of Oklahoma, Texas, parts of Kansas, parts of Colorado, all the way down to Mexico. It's pretty incredible. Let's see. Have you heard of the Conquistador Hernando de Soto? Absolutely. Largest battle between Europeans, and natives in North America is called the Battle of Mabila in 1540. I've not heard of that. We'll write that down too. It's easier to just screenshot it, actually. That's what I learned. Cool. Oh, you hear that? Screenshot. Let's see. The battle occurred in modern day Alabama. I did not know that. That'd be a great one. We're trying to find like more diverse stories ourselves. The conquistadors, I think, are super underrated. Those guys are wild. I did one on Ariana going down into the Amazon and encountering the Amazon tribe, and done a couple on Hernan Cortez, which I really enjoy those stories because those guys are just, like them or not, they were down. Let's see. The Comanche would trade horses for corn, then sneak back and steal the horses. I mean, there's an element of pragmatism to that, right? And we talked about this yesterday or night before yesterday. They had a different view of stealing. It was seen as a cultural, a necessary martial skill. Let's see. My family moved to Texas in 1825 from Kentucky. 1825 would be a crazy time to move to Texas. But when is there not a crazy time to move to Texas? Let's see. Comanche kidnapped at that level. I never knew that. Yeah, they kidnapped a lot of out of necessity. Anybody that was a threat, they would take them out. But anybody that they could use, they were super pragmatic. And you would hear lots of accounts of like blonde or redheaded Comanche warriors, and several accounts of, the most notably that comes to mind is Herman Lehman, who was kidnapped by the Apache, escaped to the Comanche, and then adopted into the tribe, and he didn't want to come back. They just had this level of freedom that they couldn't find back home. Because if you think about your average kid in the 1800s in Texas, or just the 1800s on the frontier, they had nothing but chores to do all day. If you've lived on a ranch or a farm, it's like there's nothing but chores all day long, and they don't have any power tools or tractors or four-wheelers. It's just work, work, work all day. And if you're a kid, particularly a young man, you're just another hand in the work crew, right? So a lot of times they'd get out with the Comanche and have this level of autonomy they had literally never imagined. They have a horse, they have freedom to go basically where they want, behave how they want. There's not a lot of cultural rules governing them specifically, and they could, make it up the social ladder. They could fight as a warrior and become a chief, and that's just not. They didn't have that opportunity in their day-to-day lives. If you were born to a farming family, you're going to likely die a farmer. And this was a real chance for them. A lot of them did not want to come back. I would come back, but I would run back, to be honest. Let's see. I don't think there's much difference between humans now and thousands of years ago. I'd have to agree with that. Intertribal warfare is going on today. Yeah, absolutely. Everything changes and nothing changes, right? The conquistadors were wild. They used giant war dogs to maul tribal warriors. They did. They used mastiffs who had their own set of armor. They also had war horses, which the natives described as dogs because they'd never seen a horse before. So they're just like, these psychos are out there. They're covered in this like shiny stuff that our arrows won't penetrate. And they're riding these big giant dogs. And that word spreads to the surrounding tribes. And it's like, that's not good. And it's why so many tribes united with them. We really don't understand that in modernity. We think, oh, the conquistadors like barged through Amazon or Aztec cities and Mayan cities and did it all themselves. It's like, no, they had most of their forces, 90% of their forces were surrounding tribes who were just, in the Aztec example, they're just super tired of the Aztecs coming, pilfering all their villages, taking all their people, sacrificing them. There's like, guys, we're sick of this. We're on your team. And that was the whole reason they were able to take over Tenochtitlan. I didn't think I'd be able to say that, but I did. Tenochtitlan. Let's see. Spanish explorers just fought and subjugated their way across the New World. Not wrong. Went through the southern U.S. fighting and trying to find gold in perpetuity. Yeah, the Fountain of Youth was a real thing they were after. Space Cowboy says Olive Oatman. Yeah, if you've ever seen a picture of a girl from the Old West who has these tattoo marks on her face, it wouldn't be crazy to see in Austin today, to be honest, but it's a hell of a picture from the Old West. She has the tattoo marks on her face. She had been kidnapped by the Mojave and made a Mojave, and she had all the facial tattoos, lived as a Mojave, and eventually was recaptured or traded back. I don't think she was terribly keen on coming back either. I might be wrong about that one. Tell me if I'm wrong. Let's see. Lots of stuff going on in the chat. You guys know a lot about the Spanish. Just fine. Okay. Bama Diana says they were never able to identify exactly where the Battle of Mabila took place, possibly not far from the Tuscaloosa, which is named for Chief Tuscaloosa, who was considered to be a giant. Lots of talk of giants. There's even in the Nahani Valley, it was the Naha who were supposedly giants. They're on a lot of accounts, they're like big giant guys who were there and terrorizing the valley, and then they left. Lots of accounts like that. There's one in Nevada of redhead giants. Makes you wonder. Space Cowboy says, I love the ending of Apocalypto when the conquistadors arrive on the shore. Underappreciated masterpiece. Apocalypto is so good. It does a great job of showing you the culture without being gratuitous and showing you how the Aztecs, I think they're the Mayans in this case, but subjugated all these local tribes. And you see them when they escape the city, there's fields of bodies that have been sacrificed. That's how it was. There's fields of corn and then fields of bodies. And then you'd finally hit the jungle. And it's like, that really happened. It's a charnel house. It's a horror show if you really think about it. Let's see. And also I was going to ask you, Bama Deanna, is that, maybe you know, maybe you don't, but is Mabila like where they get Mobile from? Mobile, Alabama? Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I love okay, got that. What do you think about the military naming themselves after tribes when they are barely even able to understand themselves? I don't know. I think it's not uncommon military tradition to name things after your former enemies. Native tribes have a huge legacy of service, particularly the Comanche, the Navajo, the Blackfoot. Lots of tribes have a long legacy of service in our military. So I don't think it's inappropriate. And I think it's, I would say it's just a tip of the hat. I don't have a problem with it. I don't see it in a negative light, but if the Kiowa or the Apache Comanche do, then, that's their prerogative. But for what it's worth, I think it's not terribly uncommon in military history. It's not unheard of. It's, I think, meant more as a tip of the hat. Alex says, I agree on Apocalypto. Yeah, man, just super underrated movie. And it's one like Gibson, Mel catches a lot of flack, right? And I get it. Okay. I get it. But his movies catch more flack than I think they deserve, because was there blue paint and kilts during William Wallace's time? No. But does it look cool? Yes. Would anybody pay attention to a movie or even know who William Wallace is if the movie didn't look cool? No. Did the Patriot actually happen? No. But is it an entertaining movie? Did it get people interested in the Revolutionary War? Yes. Same thing with Apocalypto. It's like, was there a lot of liberty taken at times? Sure. But you got to sell the story, and I think it is a good gateway into studying what that world was actually like. It was super brutal. It's super misunderstood in modernity. And I think this unflinching telling of the story is exactly what was needed, because you can't tell that story without the brutality. The brutality of it is the centerpiece. And it was the centerpiece of those cultures. It's whole societies that run on human sacrifice, basically. Which it's as dystopic as it sounds. Which isn't, again, it's not a cultural slight, right? It's just telling the totality of the story, contextualizing it properly. A supreme chieftain says, I'm full Navajo and connected to many chiefs and warlords throughout history, but people think they are still with the agendas. I'm not sure what that means, which I don't understand, but yes, we will always be here. Yes, the Navajo have seemingly always been there. And that's what I was trying to say. Like the Navajo have maybe more than any other tribe are the code talkers. They've have a extensive history of service. Let's see. It's Hollywood and makes people interested. Alex says it's Hollywood and makes people interested. Yeah, basically. If you want that, hopefully it drives people to shows like ours, where it's like, if you're interested and want to learn more, go check out the real history. Outlaw Josie Wales, great Western with a lot of liberties taken, but still a great show. Absolutely. And it drives the imagination to want to learn more. It's a common theme in art, right? Like that's just been the same way. There was a play about Davy Crockett, the wild man of the frontier. Forget what it was called, but it stars Nimrod Wildfire. And it's like, it's clearly Davy Crockett, but they're clearly taking liberties. Oh, he wrestled a bear, he killed a bear, he did all this other stuff. He didn't do it, but it got people interested in Davy Crockett, and Davy Crockett loved it because it sold a lot of books for him. So it's been a common theme. And in medieval paintings and all kinds of things, you would exacerbate the truth, let's say, or expand on the truth a little bit. Let's see. I got that one. Bama Deanna says she doesn't know if Mobile was named after that or not. So just a question, just wondering. Did I pronounce that correctly, Mobile? Let's see. Peter Santinello has a bunch of videos of him visiting different tribes and oh yeah. Peter Santinello, he does. He goes to a lot of reservations. That's a great show. He goes in depth on modern day reservation life, and that's how I learned about. Oh, he says, and that's how I learned about how many natives serve in the U.S. military. Yeah, and there's not like a lot of. It's a real contentious issue for good reason, and it's a real American tragedy that like there's not much opportunity on reservation life. So yeah, lots of people end up serving in the military. And obviously, like we talked about, the Tonkawa, the Karankawa, the Crow in particular had tons of more the Tonkawa and the Crow, let's say, tons of Native scouts that served with Custer, served with Ranald McKenzie, that they wouldn't have been able to find the Lakota or the Comanche or any of them without the natives' help. They would have never found any of these guys. So really, they made the victory possible, the ultimate ending victory of the Indian Wars. I think that's really underestimated in World War or Old West history. It's like without their native scouts, they would not have found anybody. They wouldn't have found any of them. Or at least it would have been decades. They'd probably still be fighting today. Bama Deanna says Tuscaloosa is where the mounds are located. DeSoto's journal talks about the mounds. Yeah, DeSoto went way into the southeast. Always blows my mind, like how far they traveled. I get annoyed having to go to like San Antonio. Alex says the elders of the tribes were proud of their military service and they used their tribal names in the military. Younger generations, not so much. Yeah, that's kind of, that speaks to the larger, that's how the whole country is, right? The whole world is. But yeah, I think that is super underestimated how critical the scouts were and how hard they fought. They really, you guys gotta let me know if I got something in my mouth. I don't know if I do. If I have something in my mouth on the playback here, I'm holding everybody in this live chat accountable. But yeah, who was it? Curly was Custer's favorite Crow scout. He was killed at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Several Crow scouts were. Several testified in the after action reports, but they were in the thick of it because they really didn't like the tribes they were fighting against. Let's see. The elders of the, okay. Space Cowboy says Edward S. Curtis, a photographer, would be a good show topic. Cool. Noted. I'm going to screenshot that now. I turned off the sound effect, hopefully. Nope, didn't turn it off, but it'll work. All right. So anybody else have any questions about the Cheyenne? About, I guess I did my best to answer the scalping one. That's a contentious one, though. I'll go research some more, but I kind of settled on it expanded after European arrival. Maybe we'll come back and I can find somebody to debate on that. A debate would be fun, right? I thought about that. Like, got to find something good to debate on, but debates are always fun. Let's see. So many stories in Arkansas about DeSoto, fought the Caddos around the town of Caddo Gap. Yeah, I've been really wanting to do a story about that. I didn't know like how well it would go over because everybody really likes the Old West stuff, but I really have a lot of fun covering the 1600s. Like I said, the conquistadors are always a really interesting topic for me. So we'll throw that in coming up here. I'd like to do that, DeSoto and the Caddos, because a lot of those fights were super brutal, and they're much more old school than we think of. It's like guys in armor with what do you call it? Like they're old proto muskets and swords and everything. Do you know anything about the Aboriginal tribes from Australia? Not a ton. I wanted to do some stuff from Australia. It's kind of, if you do, let me know because I'm trying to find some battles there. I mean, we could do Burkes and Wills. I think that's a fascinating story. They just didn't have a lot of battles that I've been able to find. Maybe I need to look into it more carefully. Though Burkes and Wills is a hell of a story. I'm trying to find like how to maybe Burkes and Wills versus the Outback or something. I need a versus angle for the main show. Which, if you don't know about Burkes and Wills, go look them up. It's like the Australian version of Lewis and Clark, but even crazier. Arkansas has an underrated history. You know what? Y'all do, and we need to do an Arkansas episode. That is correct. You guys have an absolutely underrated history, an underrated state, to be fair, and we need to do an Arkansas episode. If you have any that you know of, shoot them my way, either here in the live chat or email. There are Aboriginal cave findings in Australia, cave paintings depicting now extinct megafauna like giant kangaroos. A giant kangaroo. I could deal with that. No, I don't know. Maybe I'm glad that's gone. It sounds fun, but I don't know. That could be dangerous. Native Americans were the first to receive. Well, I mean, yeah, Native Americans were put on the reservation system. There was an Aboriginal cave, and we got that one. A lot of Civil War battles in Arkansas. Yeah, I've thought about doing some Civil War stuff. It's a tough venue to get into, though, because the Civil War guys know so much. They are Civil War specialists, so they're kind of in their own lane, right? But we could cover it. There's so much good Civil War history. Let's see. Arkansas, beautiful state for sure, says Pet Detectives. It is. It's a beautiful state. I think one of those people, until you go there, you're like, whoa, this is really pretty. Cahokia Mounds are in Illinois. I've heard of the Cahokia Mounds. Space Cowboy says saber-toothed kangaroos. You stay freaking me out, man. That's going to be in my dreams now. If they were saber-toothed, this isn't going to be a popular take, but not all the animals can, make it, right? The dinosaurs didn't make it. Apparently the giant kangaroos didn't make it. And I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I'll tell you that. Armenian Bishop says, I'm a Civil War buff. Are you really? What battle would you suggest we start on? I'm not exactly a Civil War buff. I just grew up watching the Ken Burns show with Shelby Foote, right? Now, what happened in the Battle of Cahokia? Very soothing Mississippi gentleman voice. Does a great job on the baseball documentary too. Let's see, a lot of Civil War battles. We covered that. Yeah, Armenian Bishop, let me know. Okay, Armenian Bishop in the chat says P Ridge, maybe in Northwest Arkansas. Okay, P Ridge, cool. Definitely make video content on the conquistadors. Yeah, we got some. You can check out, like I said, if you just put in conquistadors on our channel, there'll be a couple that pop up, and there are more coming. They're fun to write about. Let's see. See, he's doing a reevaluation. Oh, he's doing a revolution documentary. I heard about that, and we've got some young Washington stuff coming. We'll probably hit quite a bit of revolutionary stuff as we move towards 4th of July because it's What is it? What's 2.5 centuries, whatever that is. It's 250 years. And they had the Young Washington movie coming out on July 4th. So we'll ride that wave, you know? Civil War guys are intense, says Alec. They are. They're intense. And we love them. Hey, I'm glad they're there, but they're intense, man. It's like guys that are into baseball. And it's like, well, guys, there's 160 games. I can't keep up with this whole thing. Or 160, 180, something like that. And they watch every game and know every player. Let's see. I can't wait to see Young Washington, says Space Cowboy. Yeah, it's going to be dope. I think it's going to be dope. Let's see. Lots of stuff in the chat, so I'm just perusing through here. Bama Deanna says, a Civil War buff here too. Well, we'll have to make you guys proud with our P Ridge episode. What sparked your interest in cowboys and tribes? Rain Travels asks. Has this been a passion of yours for a long time? Yeah, I'm from a cowboy family, and that's what was around. My dad had hundreds of Louis L'Amour books and Old West history. My grandpa had tons of Old West history books, and I grew up on everybody lived on the same plot, or same ranch, and that's all that was around. So I was super into it. And everybody around me was wearing hats and boots and stuff. So I was like, you get into what's around you. And it's just, I think it's a super, super interesting, especially for Americans, because it's like, well, yes, I live in Texas, and it's like, well, see what that Whataburger is? There was a massacre that happened there. You can go all over, and it's like, well, if you know what happened, you can see how it's developed, and you're just like, wow, that happened here. And like I said, now it's a Walmart or a Whataburger or whatever. So much history, so little time. Yeah, I think I've said before, I get a lot of comments about like, oh, are you running out of stories? And it's like, it's kind of like, it's going to be taking decades, let's say, to run through every story. There's just endless amounts of them just in one book. Like Indian Depredations in Texas has dozens and dozens of them. Great book too. If you don't have that and you're interested in this subject, it's written by A.J. Soule in the 1890s. So it's all contemporary accounts, and they're like short. It's like one story is a couple pages. It's a good bathroom reader, but don't read it in the bathroom. That'd be weird. Glad to watch Alabama beating LSU. Uh-oh. Now we're going to get into controversy. My stepdad's a Bama fan, though, and it's like, I don't even want to go around if Bama loses. It just casts a pale of misery over Bama fans nationwide. When I was a kid, the book Across 5 Aprils was required reading. I've never heard of that. It's not like some Turner Diaries thing, is it? You're going to get me in trouble? Many don't know Washington started the French and Indian War. I don't know if he started it, but he served in it. He did some brutal stuff in it. Supposedly, he took a guy out with a hatchet, which is like, even if that's half true, if he was like party to the guy being taken out with a hatchet, that's wild. The dude was out there to scrap for sure. I think he gets overlooked a lot. It's like, oh, he was a gentleman and a statesman, and he was wealthy. It's like he wasn't really wealthy until he married Marsha Washington. He did like a Kanye, right? He like married this super rich girl, and she had everything from her ex-husband, and he was just like, just scoot in here. But until then, he was a soldier. He was an officer. He didn't come from literally nothing, but he was out there scrapping in the wilderness. Let's see. I wish I could download all of American history into my brain like they do in The Matrix, says Space Cowboy. Give it a couple of years. You might just have that. When I was a kid, I got that. Let's see. Oh, so Across 5 Aprils is a book about the Civil War. That makes sense. Started in April, 60? And then went to 65? I think it was over before. That's when Lincoln went to the play, right? In April 65. I don't remember entirely, but I don't think that worked out great. Let's see. Armenia. Okay, we're talking back and forth. I like it. Shake the chat up. We're interacting here. George Washington took out a dude with a hatchet. Sounds like a scene from The Patriot. Yeah, there's a lot of contention as to whether he did it or he ordered a guy to do it, but no, somebody got hacked up with a hatchet and Washington was involved. And that's just one thing. He led all kinds of battles, really, really brutal battles with really, really close calls. They're in the wilderness fighting against the French and their, I believe, Mohawk allies. It is all very much like the Patriot, where it's very thick. There's ambushes. There's not a lot of like pitched battles. And it is just a blood feud. Not between just the British and the French either, but between the tribes that they were allied with. Let's see. Which to me is like a very like Vietnam thing where you have this like overarching power. Let's say it's like China is the French and they're marshaling the native tribes like North Vietnamese. Or in this case, it would be China, right? But the French were before that. But the China is mobilizing and paying a large part in financing and outfitting the North Vietnamese, and then America doing the same with the South Vietnamese. And these two powers kind of clashed through that. Or in the fight, they're dealing with tribes that really hate each other and then two larger powers that really hate each other. So it just intensifies everything. It ended when Lee. Okay, so it ended when Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox, right? I knew that, but I couldn't remember if it was in April of 65. So it was April of 65. When did Lincoln go to the Playhouse? Let's see. Lots of stuff in here. Lots of stuff. This is fun. It's a good Saturday night, guys. Glad everybody came out. I wish I could play music, but you get flagged for that. Just imagine that you're listening to like All Right Now by Free. Okay. It ended when Lee surrendered to, okay. Cane Hill slipped by me. I'm not sure what we're talking about that. This is moving fast. During the French and Indian War, the French would wear war paint and native clothing to rally their native allies. Yep, that's true. There's actually several accounts of Jesuit monks and priests and missionaries doing the same thing in battles throughout Canada, in the Northeast, because it's like they were, especially the Jesuits, they're really known for like embedding themselves inside of cultures. It's a controversial organization, but they're good at that. They get inside cultures, and they're so embedded in this culture. They have so much at stake that, and so intent on winning the loyalty and hopefully the fealty of the tribes they're with eventually, that they take to the warpath, like priests painted up with war paint and with a rifle and tomahawk and stuff. It really happened, and it's a wild visual to think about. All this stuff would make a great, we always say that, this would make a great movie, but it really would. It'd make a great movie. Better than like a bunch of superheroes flying around with a raccoon. The hell is that? What is that movie? You guys seen that? Good soundtrack. I can't remember what it's called, but a raccoon? Play public domain music. It all kind of sucks though, doesn't it? I want to play like all kinds of stuff, but I can't. They got me over a barrel, Space Cowboy. Shortly after the surrender. Yeah, I know. Shortly after. He didn't last like very long. Well, that's not the nicest way to say it. There should be like a 6-month moratorium on presidents attending plays after war. It's like, no, 6 months at least, and then you can go to Broadway. Guardians of the Galaxy, Steve Miller. And if you're a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm not harshing on you, right? I'm just saying, like, wouldn't it be cooler to see a movie about a priest fighting for the Mohawk? Let's see. Cheyenne captured Union artillery at P. They did. I did not know that. Cheyenne captured Union artillery at P Ridge in Arkansas. The TV series The Blue and the Gray was filmed around Prairie Grove when I was a kid. Yeah, I watched that. And that where they brand the guy for cowardice. The Blue and the Gray, right? I remember I got a double VHS of that as a kid, and that scene was one of the first ones I saw, and I was like 10, and I didn't realize they did that, and I was like, what the hell are they doing? Like, why are we doing this? We're branding our own guy, and he was like, and I'm screaming in the movie. I was like, well, I don't understand what I just watched, but I don't want to watch anymore. Yes. Threads from the National Tapestry Channel has a great video about the day Lincoln was shot. Required listening for fans of HOKC. Great. We're not fans of Lincoln being shot, but Yes, we're fans of learning about history. Didn't see Blue and Gray, but looks like something to watch, says Armenian Bishop. Oh, yeah. If you're a fan of the Civil War, it's from 80s, 1980s, maybe late 70s. Cherokee and Stand Watie are big medicine in Oklahoma. Not sure what that means, but it sounds cool. See, Space Cowboy, that is a favorite of mine too. Space Cowboy, are you in England? England? He's talking a lot about the BBC. And then there's also a video about the hunt for John Wilkes Booth. We might do a video on that. That's a curious event. I don't know how I feel about the official story there. The guy that shot him was a eunuch weirdo. Do we really know he shot him? And then there's the big conspiracy behind him, and they should not have hung, especially should not have hung Mary Surratt. There was no way. That was a spectacle. That was unjust, in my opinion. A lot of tomfoolery around there. And then her son escapes to the Vatican and becomes part of the Swiss Guard for the Pope. There's a lot of, like, what is happening here? There's a lot of oddities. Let's see. And that weird little eunuch, I forget his name, but he fired on Wilkes when they'd ordered him not to. They said, no, we got to bring this guy out alive. He's in this little barn. They're trying to smoke him out. And they're like, we got it. He's got a broken leg and stuff. It's like, this is going to be easy pickings. Then we can bring this guy back. We can try him. We can actually find out who's involved and punish the proper people and leave the other ones alone. But this little wacko shot John Wilkes Booth and screwed the whole thing up. So why did he do that? Did he do it on accident? I don't know. Let's see. Pennsylvania Plowboy says, my name is Mud. Primus fan. Talk about a coup. Yeah, seriously. Stephen Miller says the last Confederate battalion was Cherokee. I know lots of Cherokee and Seminole served with the Confederates. Let's see. Big conspiracy that Booth. Yeah. Bama Deanna says big conspiracy that Booth did not die in that barn. Absolutely. Right. There's lots of shady stuff. I don't know that I think Booth even died there. Let's see. I agree about Mary Surratt. She was just a landlord, 100%. She was just a landlord, and they even argued on the gallows. Like the other guys were like, you should not hang this lady. This is ridiculous. They used harsher language probably. That was a complete injustice. You guys ever in Oklahoma, you should see the new 45th Infantry Museum we're opening. My brother is some higher up there, assistant curator or something. Cool. Yeah, we'd love to go see that. Where at in Oklahoma is that? I've been wanting to go see Oklahoma more. I'm a big college wrestling fan. Oklahoma State is not too far from here. I want to go see a match. Stand Watie was the last Confederate to surrender. Am I saying that right? Stand Watie? My brother's museum has some collections of the Indian police forces. Cool. Oklahoma is such a close tie to all the native history up there, which makes sense. It was the first large-scale reservation land. Watie. Okay, Watie. Good looking out, Alex. When you narrate episodes, and I'll look online for how to pronounce stuff, and even when you spend a lot of time figuring out how to pronounce it, and you will always get comments saying that's not how you pronounce it, especially the Pacific Northwest. You guys got some tricky names up there, and you get very offended when someone mispronounces them even slightly. So I'd like to say that I'm sorry, but I feel like we can, meet each other in the middle a little bit. You have very complex names. Maybe we'll, a little bit of grace with the pronunciation. Just saying, just a touch of grace. Let's see. Dr. Mudd, right? In the Lincoln assassination trial, Dr. Mudd, I don't think he knew anything. He just set Booth's leg. He's just a doctor. He said this guy's hurt, so it's your job to fix him, and he did. And they're just trying to make examples of all these people because they didn't really know what had happened. Let's see. Right, that was Stand Watie, surrendered in June 1865, a Cheyenne chief. So was he like would that be akin to the Japanese soldier that was in the Philippines and didn't surrender? Was he kind of out there rogue by himself? Watie was Cherokee. Many tribes had slaves. That is correct. Yeah, many tribes did throughout the Southeast. And it it wasn't chattel slavery in the sense that like the American system worked. It was like people that they captured actually from tribes. It wasn't a went to market and sold slaves kind of situation. But yeah, they had slaves and they fought for their right to retain their slaves. When they were moved on the Trail of Tears, they brought their slaves with them. So it was yeah, highly stratified culture. And if you weren't adopted into a tribe, you were likely working for them for free. And there was lots of grunt work to be done, right? Like anytime things like animals or hunting carcasses need to be skinned, or water needed to be gathered, shelters constructed, firewood, all kinds of stuff. They needed people to do it, and they would go get slaves a lot of times. All right. Any more questions about the Cheyenne tribes? Cheyenne warrior societies. Do you have one that you would, I think we asked that earlier. I want to see if anybody answered. Which Cheyenne warrior society would you most like to be a part of? Would you like to be a dog soldier or a fox soldier or an elkhorn soldier? Me personally, I think the fox society is pretty cool. I like the aesthetic with the fox tails everywhere. I feel like that's pretty ballin'. I know the dog soldiers are like the big dudes. They're like, they get the most fame and everything. And like, I get it. I want the limelight. Look at me. I'm talking on YouTube for an hour and a half. I want the limelight. Man, I like the swag of the fox soldiers more. I like limelight. Okay, sure. I like limelight, but I like looking cool a lot. I really like that. You might say like, "Oh, do you really?" Yeah, I do. Okay, I'm trying at least. And if I had a bunch of fox tails on me right now, you'd say that guy really looks cool. Pet Detective says fox soldier, smart man. I agree. Space Cowboy says I'd be a medicine man. Fair. I like that. That's cool. You'd be doing some freaky stuff, man. In the sense of like, yeah, you'd be doing some ceremonies and blowing smoke and blessing stuff all the time. Let's see. It'd be a cool life. It'd be cool. It's a good choice. Also suggests Rush Limelight for our music. Yeah, that's a very good one. Love that. Rush is and we had a Canadian topic tonight, so that's a perfect song. We could walk into Tom Sawyer and then halfway through switch to Limelight. Plowboy says Elk Society. I haven't seen anybody choose elk, and they are kind of like the boss man. Did the Cheyenne have any female soldiers? No, that's pretty. They would train, like the females could fight, they could shoot. They were, trained enough to protect the village, but they weren't trained in hand-to-hand combat or as warriors in general. There are accounts of women being in fighting forces, but it's the same as today. Like you don't have the physicality in most instances, both to make the trip to and from the battlefield and to actually compete in hand-to-hand combat against other full-size, full-grown male warriors. It's just a real rarity. Let's see. Armenian Bishop says, I don't know why Stanway T was a holdout. Okay. Guessing he had tribal interests. Yeah, fair. I was just wondering if he was just out there going rogue. And after the Civil War, like Kansas was a total war zone, right? With tell me the guy who Jesse James rode with. Oh, how can I not remember this? Can somebody tell me? Brushy Bill Anderson. I beat you guys. But yeah, he was really leading all these guerrilla attacks, right, for years in Kansas. So well after the Civil War, this whole place was a madhouse. Let's see. Rain Travel says, I saw Rush live in 2012. Cool, man. Cool. That's a great band to see live. A real musicians band. Viking women were warriors. Yeah, some of there's accounts of that, but just in the practicality of it, there's not a ton to substantiate that. They could have defensive forces that would watch over the village, but there's just not a lot to substantiate women warriors out on long, protracted offensive maneuvers or missions. What's the word I'm trying? Operations. That's the word I'm trying to think of. Let's see. The Oklahoma tribes got punished for helping the South. Yeah, I guess I never thought about that. Because they had to make an example of like the entirety of the South. Johnson was sticking it to him. Andrew Johnson. Let's see. Oh, we got a lot of stuff in the chat. Glad to have everybody out here. This is fun. Yeah, keep hitting me more of which warrior society you want to be part of and why. And if you have any other questions, we're at almost 2 hours, so we'll take a couple more questions and start wrapping it up. And if you have any suggestions for our next stream, which is Saturday night, we have an episode out tomorrow, then probably Monday or Tuesday night for our next one. We're looking for spooky stuff. We're looking for conspiracies. We're looking for stuff that's outside the norm. Let's see. And we're checking the poll again. 78% of you say you would visit the Nahani Valley. You guys are just the wildest. Steve Miller says Rush is one of my favorite bands. Highly underrated. Highly underrated. Steve Miller Band is one of mine. Yeah. Another one, I think, really, like, if you grew up in the 70s, you probably saw Steve Miller Band. You didn't really see Steve Miller, but you heard them everywhere. And now they're kind of underrated. A lot of people would know the Steve Miller song. They'd know, like, oh, I know the Joker, but I don't know who the Steve Miller Band is. They might know the songs more than the group. But you know how that is. It's all cyclical. So in another 5-10 years, he'll be hot. What's your take on the lost tribe of Israel actually being the original Native American tribes? I think, again, it's just an uncharitable way to say it would be pseudo history. I just don't think there's a lot to substantiate that. They claim that about the Irish and who else? The Vikings, obviously. And I don't even know that there's a lot to substantiate the land bridge theory, but I don't think the primary navigation was from Europe to the North American continent, and then the diaspora from there, like native diaspora, started from the East Coast. I don't really think it happened that way. I think there's a lot to suggest some Polynesian settlement or the Polynesian excursion to Southern California, because the Chumash have very Polynesian features, much more so than any of the other surrounding tribes. They have more facial hair, and they had canoes that are of a certain type that you only see in Polynesia. And the trip, like, they've done studies, experiments on this. I know they've done studies and experiments on everything, but bear with me. The trade winds from Polynesia to California would be feasible for experienced navigators, because what you would do is sail against the current. So the current's coming this way, away from California. But if you sail against it, if you run into hard times, or you're like, we've gone too far, you just ride the current back. So this would have been a trip that they are capable of making. And also, they found chicken bones from Polynesia in South America, and then potatoes from South America in Polynesia that dated back to the 1300, something like that. You might correct me in the chat, but a long time ago. And the only way that these things could have happened was direct transactions, right? Let's see. Take the money and run from Steve Miller. Absolutely. I think CCR is super underrated, and they're due for a big revival amongst the younger generations. Another like powerhouse band, super like catchy, simple songs. Let's see, the Sasquatch. See, Alex says the Sasquatch has terrorized the Choctaw around McCurtain County. Yeah, we just did. Did you see we just did a live stream 2 days ago on it. Kind of covered the basics of it. They supposedly had a whole war with Sasquatch, with like not one Sasquatch, like a whole family. It kind of portrays it like, oh, they fought one Sasquatch. Now, if it's true, they fought like 6 or 7 and they took out 3 of them, which ain't bad. That's a 50% casualty rate. I saw There was a narrow, livable band of land they could have navigated from the land bridge between ice sheets, but likely the earlier evidence is boats along the Alaskan shore and hopping to, yeah, South America. That makes more sense to me because you could island hop from essentially what, no, what's northern Russia, Siberia, the eastern reaches of Siberia to Alaska. Those islands are only a couple of miles apart at their closest. So given centuries, like, yeah, you could work your way all the way down to South America. I ain't staying in Alaska. No offense, but you know what I mean? I'll keep working my way south. And I would stop somewhere around San Diego. Let's see. Boats from South Pacific through French Polynesia to South America. Yeah, I think people discount how possible the navigation from Polynesia to the South or North American continents was. And it had been repeated, I think, in the 1940s. The guy took his boat somewhere like 1940s to 1970s, somewhere in there. I put your podcast on at night because you have a pleasant storytelling voice that is relaxing. Thank you. I guess it depends on who you ask, right? But thank you. I very much appreciate that. Hopefully the stories don't put you to sleep, but if my voice does, that's good. I'll take that. Let's see. And thank you for watching. Evidence points to earlier peoples before the land bridge. All right, it does. And it's the same thing about the chicken bones and the potato. There's just doesn't seem like there's one train of evidence, and it seems like it kind of points to me, maybe it points to seven. It's not one mass incursion, not one mass migration crossing the land bridge and then crossing the land bridge, and then there being a diaspora from Alaska southwards, right? I think it's more that you had several points of people coming from. You would have one group reach land in Alaska, another group reach land in Southern California, and another in South America. And in my mind, that's more likely than one group coming from the north and then populating two entire continents. Let's see. I can't even imagine taking a rowboat across the Pacific Ocean. So these would be more like sailboats, like big platforms, big rafts with sails on them. And they would take plants and like literal plants that they would grow while they're traveling, pigs, chickens, like a whole voyage. They would like a wagon train, but on oceans. Short Stories by Kate says, brave souls to sail into the unknown like that. Yeah, braver than me. I don't want to cross Lake Austin. Let's see. It's mind-blowing with the megafauna here. Yeah, North and South America have some wild stuff. Mammoths and giant bears and dire wolves and saber-toothed cats. Again, it's like, listen, I don't want to see anything go extinct. But if I have to pick from a lineup of things that we're going to have go extinct, the bear, the giant bear, and the saber-toothed cat and the dire wolf are like, sorry, guys. To me, it's like, sorry. You know, if I got to pick. Stephen Miller says, very big catamarans. Right, yeah. Meaning like a big sail, right? North America still has black panthers. Yep, there's some in Texas. Let's see. And there might be, I've heard of some being loose in Britain, which is interesting. I just heard a story of a guy in a tree stand hunting for deer in Texas, and he saw a tiger below him and had to call his friends. He's like, I'm not getting out of this stand, which I think tigers can climb trees, but yeah, good call anyways. He calls his buddies on his cell phone. He's like, you got to come get me because there's a tiger. You got to like chase the tiger off. And it's like, I'd be like, yeah, I'm coming right away. But they, show up. The tiger is gone, but he says he saw a tiger and it was like walking all around the place. And it is actually believable because there are more tigers in Texas than there are in the wild in the rest of the world. Texas just loves having wild animals. Well, they're not wild, but then, yeah, the tigers get out. It's a whole thing. So you come to Texas and you see a tiger, it's chill. Just relax. They're all over the place. I remember learning that there are some religious practices. Yeah. I mean, between other religious practices that are common between modern day Judaism and native tribes. Yes, but you could say that about modern day Judaism and a lot of cultures, right? You could say that about Judaism and Christianity. There's a lot of crossover, liturgically, etc. Alex says, I hate to say it, but that's why grizzlies and wolves went away. Yeah, I kind of thought it was, you're right. California is a contentious state, but I think it is pretty gangster to eliminate the grizzly and then put it on your flag. And granted, it wasn't eliminated when they had it on the flag, but they're just like, see that thing on our flag? We're going to eliminate it. Like, that's kind of respect, right? That's a contentious take. I get it, but you know what I mean? Tell me I'm wrong. Jaguars are the largest cat in North America, and they have more pound for pound strength than lions and tigers. Yeah, they do they haul like crocodiles into trees, right? And they are built more compactly, right? Still, I think I'd rather run into a jaguar than a lion or a tiger. Tiger's probably the last one I want to run into. Let's see. Menageries are a real thing? Yeah, sure. I don't know. What do you mean by that, Stephen Miller? Wait, I forgot your name. I didn't realize that. Your name's Stephen Miller. All right. What's up, Steve? Oh, yeah, you're right. So Alec is saying there's also the Tiger King in Oklahoma. That's right. Yeah, there's a bunch of tiger operations in Oklahoma. It's a very tiger heavy area from the Mexican border all the way to Kansas. Lots of tigers. Imagine the conquistadors coming through now, and they're just like, hey, what the hell are all these tigers doing here? Being mauled by a grizzly is a fate worse than dying because they eat their prey a lot. Yeah, it's not good. If you've ever heard I'm not telling you to go listen to them, but if you've ever heard the recordings of Timothy Treadwell and his girlfriend from the documentary Grizzly Man, I don't think Werner Herzog didn't put them in there because they're so bad. But if you know who Timothy Treadwell is, the guy who went out to live with the grizzlies and like make them his friends and stuff in Alaska, and believe it or not, it didn't work out great. It's a mildly sad, kind of funny movie because you're just like, bro, this isn't going to work for you. At the end of the day, the end of the movie, they kill him, and the whole sound recording is, you can still find it, and he's just going, oh, he's eating me, and oh, this is bad. And it's like, yeah, it goes on for minutes and minutes and minutes. It's terrible. So I'm not recommending it, but if you can't sleep tonight, check it out. Stephen Miller says they have personal zoos. Yes, exactly. Personal zoos are a thing, especially in Texas. And you can be driving, if you've never been here, you can be driving down the highway and you'll see a whole herd of wildebeests or something. And if you're from Texas, it doesn't even bother them. But if you're not, you're just like, why are these wildebeests here? And they'll say, oh, the lions need something to hunt. And you go, what? Let's see. El tigre, vamos. True. That's what I was saying. We got a lot of cat talk in the chat now. Pet Detective says, don't mess with Mother Nature. I feel like Texas is like, that's our whole thing. That's our whole deal, is they want to mess with Mother Nature. Bears were so feared and revered for their strength that pagan European warriors had bear cults. Yeah, it's very similar to the Cheyenne, right? Nothing exists, nothing new under the sun. And they had wolf clans and all kinds of stuff. A lot of times it's because they'd observe the behavior of these animals and be like, yo, I want to be like that, right? That's how we pick mascots now. The Chicago Bulls. Like, there's a reason we don't have the Chicago Termites, right? Werner Herzog, wow, Treadwell was nutty. Yeah, I kind of wonder. Joe Rogan claims that movie was a comedy. I don't think it was a comedy, but it is kind of unintentionally funny sometimes. Because he's just petting these bears. He's going like, little bear, little bear. And you're just like, oh, this is not going to work. Cobras have been found in East Texas. Just fantastic. Fantastic. That's what we really needed, was more venomous snakes. We're a little low on those. UCLA Bruins, another example. Yeah, absolutely. USC Trojans. They probably thought that was a hell of a name when they founded it. Now it's, not as imposing. You don't really think of warriors when you think Trojans now, right? I don't. Cobras in East Texas, exclamation point, question mark. I know, I'm not feeling great about that myself. Pythons have killed nearly all the wildlife in Florida. This is a fun Saturday night chat. Yeah, I mean, we got to quit bringing in snakes. We have enough snakes. If you want to add a tiger or like a jaguar or two, that's fine. I feel like we can squeeze that in, but we have enough snakes. No more. We need a moratorium on snakes. God gives man dominion over nature. Genesis 1:26. That should be on the Texas flag. It might be. Has anybody seen any tigers or cobras in their area? Let's see, rain travels. The Apache were masters of disguise and blending into their environment. They were like native ninjas. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think a lot of people think they were just born that way. The Apaches in particular had a really strenuous training system that they put all their boys through, and a lot of their young women, where they would take them out on morning runs. It was just a lot like military training. They would put water in their mouth, and you just keep the water in your mouth while you did 2, 3, 4 miles in the hills in the morning. And then you had to spit that water back into the cup you drink it from, and it had to be the same amount. And it's obviously a test of your discipline, right? And your endurance, but it's also a genius way to train your heart rate. Like, you can't breathe out of your mouth. So it makes you keep your arousal, but yeah, so your nervous system arousal down. And it's the way to train young warriors to manage their heart rate under duress. It's really, really smart. They would have them lift rocks and do sprints, obviously box and wrestle. They had a fair kind of amalgamation of a submission wrestling system. So they had it worked out. It wasn't just like, oh, we're born hard and we're born this way. It was a system that they implemented that built them. And that system would be a little different, in the desert or in the mountains, but it was pretty uniform throughout. Let's see. Weren't there like rogue Apache well into the 1920s and 30s? Yeah, there's reports of that. And it wouldn't be unheard of at all. Because how are you going to really get everybody to report to the reservations? How are you going to really get everybody out of the mountains? Like, they almost for sure didn't. Let's see. We have many Indian mascots in Oklahoma high schools. Yeah, there's, nationwide. And again, it's like the military naming their helicopters after different tribes. It's up to the tribes, right? But I don't think it's meant as a disrespect. And several tribes have agreed to, like the Seminoles at Florida State, they take a certain amount of pride in it. Obviously, I'm talking as a collective. There may be individuals who disagree. Let's see. I don't think the Comanches cared about blending in. They rode out or killed their enemies. Yeah, I think that's true. They are underestimated as an economic power, though. Like, they were a very stripped down Spartan-esque culture, but they were really adept at trade. They were very prudent and astute businessmen, adroit businessmen. We still have some Thule elk in the San Francisco Bay Area, says Armenian Bishop. Yeah, that's been there my whole life. That's always been something you would hope to see when you went there. Didn't they reintroduce them? Because they were, at least in the San Joaquin Valley, they were like in herds. There were herds of elk, herds of antelope, and supposedly herds of grizzly. I don't know like how large that would be, but the accounts say herds. It's like, even if it's 3 or 4, that's too many grizzlies congregating. And they were big grizzlies. They were like big because there's so much food around, and it wouldn't really require hibernation in those areas. Let's see. Can you imagine the vast Comanche horse herds across the plain? The Comanche had more horses than anyone. A lot of that had to do with the spread of the horses northward. So they got the horses would come north, basically from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Like, after the Santa Fe Rebellion, that's when all the horses got loose. It was like if a bunch of iPhones got released for free, like this technology that would just change America in 2008, right? It would be an overnight flash where everyone went from dumb phones to smartphones. And that's kind of what's happening here. And the Comanche were the first to get these iPhones, or these horses in this case. and they had more than any tribe. They would deal them to the tribes north of them and also steal more than any. So where your average Lakota chief might have 40, 50, 60 mounts, your just regular Comanche guy would have a couple hundred. It's just vastly different wealth disparity for sure, because that was land was measured, or wealth was measured in large parts by land and then by horses. Those, and the Comanche had a lot of both. Let's see. Still heard of Tule elk in the western side of the Central Valley. That's right. That's where we'd always hear people talk about them, but I had never seen one. And I think they're kind of making a comeback. Great word, adroit, doesn't get used often enough. I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I study the thesaurus every morning. I don't. Let's see. Did the Comanches eat horse meat during times of famine? They did, but they were really picky with their diet. They did not like killing horses and eating them just for the, I think there was a certain spiritual element to it, but they didn't like doing it because it's just like eating money, right? They're just like, why would we do this? This doesn't make a lot of sense. They didn't like fish. They didn't really like birds. They would eat them if they had to. They would eat root vegetables, and they would collect pecans. Like there's a lot of accounts of villages, whole bands going to these vast expanses of pecan trees. They're still in Texas. In Seguin, there's a big flat next in the park, and it's just filled with pecan trees. And people go there to this day and collect huge bushels of pecans. If you know, oh, who was it? The explorer who got lost. I'm the Children of the Sun. I'm forgetting his name right now. We did an episode on him too, but he's with the children of these three Spaniards that got lost and got taken captive by, I think, the Tonkawa tribe. But either way, there's stories of them being forced, they're slaves for the Tonkawa now, they're slaves, and they're forced to collect like thousands of pecans on these river bottoms. And that's from, I don't know, 500 years ago. And now people are doing the same thing in the same spot. It's pretty cool. The Comanche were essentially on the carnivore diet. Yeah, more or less. It just, they would eat what they had to. They'd eat turtles. Trying to think of what else. Some prairie dogs if they're up north. Obviously deer, stuff like that. There were elk in Texas. Bear was super prized among everybody because it had fat. So Alex said, yeah, they were amazing horse traders. Yeah, they were even I'm kind of selling them as this like bellicose Spartan-esque tribe, right? They were really good at trading, and not just horses, especially horses, because they had more, so they could really drive the deal. Was it after Mackenzie had all those horses that was beginning of the end? Yep, that was the beginning of the end for the Comanche, because it's a brutal thing to think about, but it's like, we're going to take all your stuff and we're going to burn it so you can't come fight us again. It'd be in Vietnam where they would burn whole villages and, take everything, all the weapons caches and everything. It's the same thing. Like they just said, like, these horses are the way that it's the only way you are able to actually wage this war against us. Without these horses, you can't really do anything. You don't have the mobility to fight the army basically at all. So I think Mackenzie gets portrayed as kind of a bad guy. And if it was me, I don't have the heart to give that order, right? But it's probably the correct strategic tactical call, because it's the only thing that's going to end this fight and, stop more people dying. But it would have been a horrific thing to see. Those guys were going all afternoon. There's it's freaking the soldiers out too, right? Like a lot of these guys are grossed out by it, traumatized by it, probably a lot of them viscerally upset by it, and they're still just having to go horse by horse. They don't have like a machine gun. They got to go horse by horse by horse. And if you haven't been around horses, imagine doing it to a pack of dogs, right? It's horrific. It's really bad. It's but with all that said, I don't know, maybe been the only way to end it. Rain Travel says the U.S. military basically starved the Comanche into surrender. Yes, I think they also like I said, they took they took the only real way they could wage that war. Once they took the horses, they were kind of de facto going to starve unless they surrendered. They don't have any way to hunt then. Let's see. Alex said, I just don't see Mackenzie had a choice. Yeah, I don't think he did. I think he was really traumatized by a lot of the stuff that a lot of the calls he had to make, because he ended up in a sanitarium, a crazy house in Staten Island, and just deteriorated, like really kind of lost his mind in a couple years. He went from he was more highly regarded. He was a hotter star in the Army than Custer was, or Grant had been, or any of these guys. He was hot stuff. And then a couple years later, like he was in a sanitarium. The fall was, and they don't really know why. There's different accounts that he suffered from everything from syphilis, which I think that's kind of harsh. I don't think he had syphilis, to some genetic disorder, to just PTSD. They don't know why, but he deteriorated fast. It's a really sad story. Well, the elimination of buffalo made Quanah say, wow, that's really, yeah, that's true. Like I'm forgetting to mention that. The elimination of the buffalo herds, I mean, we're talking about, I guess I kind of think of that as all of the Plains tribes. But yes, the elimination of the buffalo herds and the depleting them of their horses was just like, you take away the food, you take away the transportation. There's no way left to wage this war. And we're waging a war. It's Quanah and his warriors, and then also their women, their children, their elderly. And it's like, we can't keep this fight up anymore. We're going to get all these people killed, not our warriors. We're going to get our families and our elderly and our children. So it just became, that's why a lot of people had a big problem with Geronimo, because they started saying like, you're letting your people suffer at the behest of your own ego. Was a lot of charges against him. I'm not saying that, but a lot of people did. Is the movie Comanche Moon realistic at all? I haven't watched that. I've heard good things about it. If you've watched that, let me know in the chat. I heard Quanah went on a buffalo hunt just for old times, and he saw no buffalo and realized no going back. Yeah, he would go out for hunts just from Star House. He was like kind of a man about town, so he went on hunts, I think, with Teddy Roosevelt. But yeah, I mean, you can imagine. It'd be like, what if they took all the cars out of Los Angeles? And you're just like, you're used to Los Angeles, and there's all the cars there, and then there's like four. There's 4 or 5 cars. You're like, it would be unimaginable, unrecognizable. And for Quanah, it's like millions of buffalo, hundreds of thousands of buffalo to, let's really see any. Let's see. All right, we'll get to wrapping it up here. We're almost at 2:15. This has been a blast. Thank everybody for coming out. What was your opinion of Quanah? Was he a hero or a villain? I mean, nobody's all hero, nobody's all villain. I think he got criticized a lot once they came into the reservation for kind of the same thing Geronimo did, for maybe being a little self-serving, self-aggrandizing, and for being too chummy with the whites. But I think that was, you couldn't hold Quanah particularly to, like, they would say, oh, you're a sellout. And it's like, well, he's half white himself. He's half American himself. And I think he didn't have a real sense of loyalty, but he took to their culture more, maybe some veiled sense of kinship. And it made him a lot more willing to wear, suit and a hat and stuff. But he would not, I think he converted to Christianity, but he adamantly would not give up his peyote. He was like, listen, guys, we'll talk. We'll make some adjustments here. I'm all for that. I'll wear the suit. I'll drive. He even got a car. Like, I'll ride around in the car, but I'm not giving up the peyote. Sorry. It's a hard line in the sand. Quanah was a product of his culture. Yeah, I would say he was a product of 2 cultures, really. Because like his Parker side of the family was one of the biggest families in Texas. Even after the Parker Fort raid, there's still the county named after them. Even at that time, there was a Parker, when he was on the reservation, there was a Parker County, Texas. And it's like, that's his family. It's a wild time in history. We had a Comanche moon. Yeah, we had a Comanche moon a few nights ago. Seems like everybody goes crazy when there's a full moon. I don't know if I believe in that entirely, but there's something. If you talk to like first responders, they'll say people go nutty during the first moon. Lunatics. There's a reason. It's called lunatics. Let's see. He would not give, that's a good point. Deanna says he would not give up his wives either. And that's a good point. You'll see like different picture of, it'll say like Quanah and wife, but it's a different lady. So He had a couple. Let's see. See if I'm missing anything else. If you want to get any more comments or questions in, we'll go another 5 minutes and then we'll let everybody enjoy their night. Again, this has been a blast. This is like a party for me. So thank you all for coming out. This is fun. Make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't think Mackenzie had a choice. Yeah, I agree. There is nothing growing like potatoes in the Llano Escatano before white dudes. I don't know what that means. Maybe you're trying to get me in trouble. I can trust you though, Alec, right? Let's see. Okay. All right. So I think we've gone through all the questions and comments. So we will be back tomorrow. We got an episode coming out, a bunch of shorts in the interim too. Be sure to check out that Cheyenne episode. I think now we've kind of gone over the warrior societies. You'll really understand the before, during, and after of all the battles we're going to talk about. And let's see, we'll have a live stream either maybe Monday and Tuesday night, or at least Tuesday night. If you have any suggestions, email me. I think the live chat closes after this. Email me at history@theokcorral@gmail.com. And trying to think, am I leaving anything out? Oh, we have a couple episodes coming up this week. So there'll be a Young Washington, a Texas Ranger episode. Obviously the Cheyenne one tomorrow. More live streams and all sorts of stuff coming your way. And we're having a real blast. And thank you all for coming out. One more look here. Alec is saying no. Yeah, he's saying Texas was barren back then. There were no crops. Absolutely, just wide expanses, and it's still just wide expanses. But there's lots of crops. Let's see, and we love our farmers. Thank God for that. This relates to you find crops now, but that terrain is scenic as the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, there's not a lot to look at. Great people though. I always thought that though. I was like, man, the Comanche live out here, and there'd be even less out there then, but there'd be a lot of buffalo. So, let's see, tonight's homework. Check out, yes, everybody and myself. Our homework for tonight is to check out Edward S. Curtis, the American photographer. We're going to look into that, and we'll report back on our next live stream. Space Cowboy. He keeps us in line. He's the sheriff of the live stream. Pet Detective says, thanks for Saturday night. Space Cowboy says, one last thing. All right, we're going to hold the closing. We're going to hold the last number up for you here. We're just starting to play Freebird, so you got to get in before the solo. Steve Miller says, my first live stream. Thanks for coming out, man. We're doing these a couple times a week, so come on by. It's been great to have you. Some great stuff in the chat. Let's see. Sadly, next year is the last Farmer's Almanac. Really? Didn't know that. Maybe Ben Franklin will write another one. You never know. Okay. Oh, and okay. Last thing. Rain Travels says, look into the Native American band Redbone. Yes, do that. Fantastic band. That is, it's not Come and Get Your Love, is it? No, it's is that Come and Get Your Love? Great songs though. Great song. Great band. Okay, absolutely love the Mountain Man content. Cool. We'll be doing a lot more of it. Space Cowboy says, thanks for letting me get that in. Always. We always got time for you, Space Cowboy. You're an OG. Okay. Y'all, well, thanks again for coming out on a Saturday night. And I'm just letting they got a lot of stuff coming in through the chat. Y'all, thank y'all again. Leon Redbone, also an awesome musician. Yeah, we'll talk some more music next time too. We'll at least talk about the songs that we'd like to have playing in the background. Next time we start a live stream, imagine me coming out to Get Up Off of That Thing by James Brown. Okay? Imagine that. All right, y'all. Thanks again for a great Saturday night. We will see you tomorrow with the Cheyenne Deadliest Battles, and appreciate all the support. Can't thank you enough. Have a lot of fun doing these. So we'll see you tomorrow, and then live stream again Monday or Tuesday. Thanks again. Y'all have a good Saturday night. God bless.